Chapter 5031. Arbor waved his hand, and a swirl of light and shadow appeared in front of his eyes, displaying the scene of the outside world. They saw that a corner of the imperial garden that had been perfectly fine was now obscured by an overwhelming amount of lush vegetation. Many small animals were desperately shuttling through the vines, as if searching for something. In the sky, there were many eagles that had gathered from all directions. One after another, they whistled in the sky above the imperial garden. The royal guards who had heard the commotion were currently clearing away these lush vegetation and killing the eagles circling in the air. Duan Yu, Hechen chuckled mischievously and turned to look at Emolien, who was holding a soul orb. TCC, once ancient Emolien appears, all living things will grow and surge crazily. It truly is super attractive. Arbor breathed a sigh of relief. He saw a little tree ant running over while brandishing its branches and twirling in front of them twice. Master, master. The little tree ant Qiuqiu called out, I wanted to tell you earlier. Ancient Emolien's soul orb can't be taken out so casually. Look, the surrounding vegetation has all gone crazy. These low-level animals and plants don't have any intelligence. Instead, it's that newborn calves that aren't afraid of tigers. And those mystic and spirit beasts that have gained intelligence don't dare to casually approach after smelling your scent. Arbor expressionlessly swept Qiuqiu a glance. Why are you always giving advice in hindsight? A trace of bewilderment hung on Qiuqiu's wooden face. He glanced at his little master and said aggrievedly, my memory isn't that good. I only remember some things when it happens. Arbor rolled his eyes at him, disinclined to say anything more to this guy. It wasn't that this guy's memory wasn't that good, it was that his memory was extremely bad. Xiao Mu turned around to look at the scene inside the demonic pupil's vortex. She saw the sage beastman's snake looking left and right, as if trying to find where they had gone. GC, Old Zhou, Shenwu, and the others were also helping the royal guards chop down the various vegetation that had sprung up in the surroundings. Arbor turned his head and glared at his husband. At that moment, Prince Mo was looking down at the soul orb in his hand, wondering if he should find a quiet place to absorb the ancient Emolien's soul orb. Abruptly sensing his wife glaring at him, Crown Prince Mo quickly looked up and returned his wife's warm smile. Qiao, what are you glaring at hubby for? Hubby has already hand-copied the Little Emperor's sutra 100 times just now, so he has already deeply recognized his past mistakes. He definitely won't commit them again, so you can't glare at me anymore. We've already copied and punished. It's time we reconcile. Duan Yu and Hechen both thought at the same time. Emolien, this guy, he's usually aloof and incomparably proper in front of outsiders, but when he's in front of Jojo, he's like a completely different person. His words and actions are especially shameless. Then they thought. Jojo, that stoic and wooden face, had the attitude of not even bothering to speak more than a few words to you in the early years. If it weren't for the fact that Emolien was like a cockroach, stubbornly seizing every opportunity and shamelessly pestering her, perhaps they really wouldn't have been able to get close to her so quickly. Emolien walked up to his wife with a grin. Sensing gazes from both sides, he narrowed his phoenix eyes and turned to look at them. This guy glared back at Duan Yu and Hechen's gazes before reaching out to hold his wife's hand and saying with a chuckle, Jojo, your husband copied the Little Emperor's sutra the entire morning and hasn't eaten a mouthful of hot porridge yet. Xiao Mu grabbed him with a backhand. Chapter 5032. He dragged Emolien to the main planet at once. As soon as the two of them set foot on the main planet, they immediately sensed that the surrounding divine power was much stronger than the other star zones. Emolien was pleasantly surprised. We can have rotten peach blossom and the others come here to cultivate in the future. The divine power here is almost on par with holy power. As far as the two of them could see, it was a stretch of fine jade dragons. The jade river meandered and was emerald green. It looked like water but wasn't water, like a jade river that slowly extended into the distance. A light breeze brushed past their faces, and waves of a tranquil and clean fragrance dispersed. Occasionally, a few peach blossom petals would flutter and land on the emerald jade river. With a gentle ripple, They would drift away along the jade river that resembled a dragon vein. This scene made him feel carefree and happy. The two of them looked at each other, and the little stoic harumphed with a taut face. Just stay here and absorb the soul orbs. Wife, I just came back. Emolien glanced at her aggrievedly. Actually, there's no rush. What did you say? Hey, I'll go absorb right now. Emolien thought about it again. The first few lines of the little emperor's sayings were, everything Jojo says is right, so you must accept it obediently. After copying the little emperor's sayings 100 times, Emolien believed she could recite them backwards. Sir Jojo nodded solemnly with a pair of small paws behind his back. Then he led her towards their small courtyard. The small courtyard was encircled by fine jade dragons, like a pearl in the vast ocean. As soon as they entered the courtyard, they immediately smelled a faint and mellow fragrance. Arber's eyes lit up. He tugged Emolien's hand and pulled him to the back of the small room. Then he took out an appearance talisman again and threw it out. A palace in the distance was like a veil that had been pulled open, revealing itself before them. Bit by bit, from the sharp corners of the eaves to the painted walls and corridors, then to the blue bricks and glazed tiles, the enormous palace appeared one by one. Although this was not the first time she had seen it, Emolien still felt that it was visually stunning. What greeted his line of sight was a towering tree with colorful spherical flowers. One flower after another fell heavily on the branches. Between the fine leaves, there was occasionally a small golden peanut that was faintly discernible. Jojo's eyes lit up. He pulled Emolien forward and sat on a tree branch. He took out a golden peanut and waved it in front of Emolien. Longevity fruit. Chiochio said last time that the longevity fruits had already appeared, but there weren't many of them. There were only 5 of them on the entire tree. Jojo, it really looks like peanuts. It was only the length of a finger and looked very similar to peanut. However, this longevity fruit was golden all over and felt like ice or jade in her hand. It was cool and refreshing. When she sniffed it up close, it emitted a pleasant fragrance that seeped into her heart. It naturally couldn't be an ordinary peanut. One for you, one for me, one for Duan Yu, one for Rotten Peach Blossom, and one for Big Brother First. Arber grinned. This fruit contained extremely powerful energy. It was guaranteed that everyone would improve more or less after eating it. Jojo, can you eat this? Yes. Sir Jojo nodded repeatedly. If I can't absorb the extremely powerful energy inside, I still have Chiochio, Little Water, and Little Earth to help me absorb it. That was to be expected. Xiaoqiao's Dantian star domain was supported by the sacred wood, sacred water, and sacred earth. No matter how strong the power was, it was impossible for it to cause any impact to her body. Emolien only relaxed after thinking this. Chapter 5033. The little stoic suddenly raised her stiff little face. Don't be long-winded. Hurry up and go cultivate your cultivation. Emolien coughed lightly and stroked her face. Jojo, how can you change your face so quickly? Sir Jojo harumphed and brushed his hand away, roaring, cultivate properly. Emolien twitched his mouth. Seeing that the little fellow was about to jump off the longevity tree, he hastily pulled her into his embrace and chuckled softly. Wife, you're naughty. You didn't even hug your husband when you saw him this time. Look, your husband has hand-copied Jojo's quotes 100 times and admitted his mistake. We should make up, right? Jojo chuckled as the corners of her mouth curled downwards, her expression non-committal. Wife Jojo. Emolien's eyes wavered, and a faint smile surfaced on his lips. He raised his hand to rub the little stoic's stomach. It will take at least 2 to 3 days for hubby to absorb. For darling Mo's sake, please forgive hubby for, swish. Emolien had just placed his hand on Jojo's stomach when he felt a burst of energy emanating from inside, abruptly jolting his hand several inches away. He was stupefied and looked down at his wife's stomach with a strange expression. He exclaimed in shock, Jojo, it? Arber glanced at him and absent-mindedly stroked his stomach, pacifying the agitated baby making a fuss over nothing. The little stoic said expressionlessly, Can't you tell? Baby Mo doesn't like you very much. Mo Lien's eyes instantly widened, and he hugged his wife and shouted, "Why? What did I do? Why am I not welcomed? You lied to Jojo." Mo Lien's mouth twitched, and then he hugged his little wife and swayed her back and forth, assuring repeatedly, "I won't lie to Jojo again in the future, I swear. Let's forget about what happened in the undersea abyss. Jojo, answer me." Smile. Heh. Mo Lien chuckled. He lowered his head and kissed his wife on the cheek. He raised his hand and touched her belly. "Jojo, now that I think about it, I'm still scared. If he dawdled in the abyss of the sacrificial sea for half a year without finding a way out, wouldn't he miss the most important moment in his wife's life and baby Mo's birth? That's why we shouldn't let that snake off so easily." Arbor snorted and rubbed his belly angrily. "If I secretly beat him up, what do you think my chances of winning are?" "You're alone." Arbor nodded. Mo Lien, if he said there was no chance of winning, would he suffer his wife's violent beating first? How about this little water, little earth, little tray ant, and the others are all idle? Also Chirpy, Phoenix, Little White, and the others, it's better to gather them and find a moonless and windy night to gang up on him. The little stoic pursed her lips. She was quite flexible and immediately said, "Then we'll put it on the tap first. When my Ming Ming, Chirpy, and the others advance to mature sacred beasts, we'll find him to fight." Mo Lien smiled until his eyes turned into crescents. He nodded repeatedly and said, "That's great." As he spoke, he reached out again and rubbed Jojo's belly. This time, he wasn't shaken off by the child's disdain. "Jojo, have you heard of the kingdom of Daluo?" Arbor couldn't help but be startled, and he turned to look at him seriously. "You met Lily, Mo Lien nodded solemnly. Chapter 5034. That number 0? Arbor blinked. Weren't these Lily heirs a bit unlucky? According to that state preceptor Shinto Jing, Lily, number 9 was slaughtered by Duan Yu, and Lily, number 5 was disposed of by Ming Yasi. As for this number 0, according to Shinto Jing, she followed the state preceptor to the river of forgetfulness and miserably encountered Jojo's lotus. Her ending definitely wouldn't be too pleasant. I encountered their state preceptor Shenange and this whatever Lily, number 0 at the river of forgetfulness. Mo Lien recounted the events with a sullen face. When she mentioned Lily, number 0, anger flitted across her eyes. Although he had already executed this number 0, Prince Mo felt like he had eaten a fly whenever he recalled her disgusting face. Just the thought of it made him feel disgusted. Lily, number 0 revealed a piece of information before her death. The kingdom of Daluo is planning to attack Dragonflame City. Arbor was taken aback, and then sat up straight. "But I heard from Duan Yu that this is merely a tiny kingdom of the prairie. They wanted to attack the imperial capital of the Divine Province? What a joke." "Yes, but since this attack has been planned for a long time, there must be something special to rely on. If we're talking about backing, could it be that they've already colluded with the Heavenly Providence?" "Very likely." Mo Lien nodded. "Moreover, there's a type of people called puppet masters everywhere in the kingdom of Daluo. I'm afraid there's also a problem." Arbor nodded. "Don't worry, you absorb ancient Mo Lien first. I'll set off for Dragonflame City." Mo Lien made a sound of agreement and held her hand. "Remember to be careful on the road." "Okay." Arbor was silent for a moment before saying, "The Heavenly Providence. Duan Yu already mentioned it to me." Mo Lien nodded and said, "It seems that the Qin estate has a history with zombies. They probably haven't been making this zombie mutation drug for more than 1 or 2 generations. This was probably already a set of family businesses." Arbor sighed. Then he thought of something and glanced at Mo Lien. "You fought with Duan Yu?" Mo Lien hastily shook her head like a rattledrum. "No, how could I fight with Brother Duan Yu? We haven't seen each other for a long time and missed each other, so we decided to exchange some pointers." Arbor rolled his eyes at him. "You even flattened the pomegranate tree in front of my house." "Really?" Mo Lien hugged her and smiled. "I'll plant a few hundred more for you later. You're always so talkative." Arbor pushed his face away and snorted. "You stay here and cultivate. I'll go look for them first." Then, he tossed the golden longevity fruit into his mouth. His eyes lit up. Delicious. Sir Jojo's figure flickered and disappeared from the main planet. Emolien couldn't help but laugh and shake her head. When Arbor reappeared beside Duan Yu and the others, 15 minutes had already passed. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal laughed. That guy went to cultivate? Arbor nodded and opened his palm, revealing 2 golden peanuts. The longevity fruit is ripe. One for each of us. It's delicious. You ate it? Duan Yu couldn't help being startled, and then he looked her up and down. Xiao Mu nodded expressionlessly. I'm eating it for Qiuqiu. After Qiuqiu absorbs the longevity fruit's energy, I'll eat it. I'll go out now. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal quickly picked one up and threw it into his mouth. His expression was exactly the same as Arbor's. Delicious. Duan Yu was rather speechless. Are you here to judge if it's delicious or not? Shouldn't he be evaluating the effects of his advancement? Chapter 5035. The reason Jojo ate the longevity fruit was actually because this foodie was curious about the taste of the longevity fruit. Arbor turned to look at the duo seriously. Peach Blossom, do you want to go to the main planet to accompany Emolien? Hu Shurchen was speechless. Why should I accompany him? I thought the 2 of you liked to hang out together? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't resist rolling his eyes. He really wanted to ask his Jojo, what exactly makes you think that I like hanging out with Emolien? Do I have nothing better to do than to stay at his place and watch him intentionally or unintentionally flaunt his affection all day long, calling me wifey, and stabbing me in the heart with arrows every day? Bah, it's not like I'm sick. Don't the 2 of you like to go here and there and brave through fire and water together? Hu Shurchen. When Jojo said this, he actually felt that he had no words to refute. It seemed that he and Emolien, this pair of fellow sufferers, had indeed been through water and through fire and fire. Duan Yu chuckled and coughed lightly. Peach Blossom, just go to the main planet. I think you definitely won't want to go to any other star domain. Hu Shurchen's eyes lit up. In that case, that main planet is very different from the other star domains? Of course. All right then. Hu Shurchen pursed his lips and said reluctantly, I think Emolien should also have a lot of difficulties absorbing the ancient Emolien's soul orb, so I'll go check on him. Duan Yu and Arbor exchanged glances and couldn't resist chuckling. This guy just didn't mean what he said. He was clearly worried that something would go wrong when Emolien advanced, so he spoke haughtily and coquettishly. Peach Blossom Immortal, don't be greedy for the jade dragons flowing on the main planet. Arbor waved his hand and handed the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal to the main planet as he instructed him. A certain venerable immortal harumphed and muttered to himself, I'm not a foodie like you. Arbor used his demonic pupil to observe for a moment before purposely finding a deserted place and flashing out with Duan Yu. As soon as the 2 of them revealed their auras, the holy beast serpent sensed them and came over. It looked around and said, Hey, why is it only the 2 of you? Where are they? Who is it? Arbor looked at him with a serious face and asked knowingly. Bradamo and Little Peach Blossom, where are they? Arbor pursed his lips. Little Mo, Little Peach Blossom, they called each other so intimately. Those who didn't know would really think that they were good brothers. Fierce girl, don't go. Where did you stuff my brother Mo and brother Peach Blossom to? It's none of your business. Arbor snapped at him before turning to look at GC and the others. GC only felt that the little girl's eyes were sharp and abnormally sharp. She hurriedly bowed and saluted, I don't know what orders Mistress has. Get ready. We'll set off tomorrow. Yes. GC and the others hurriedly cupped their hands in acknowledgement. They didn't dare to ask where to set off and why they didn't see their master. Arbor turned to look at Duan Yu. I'm afraid there's a change in Dragonflame City. I have to leave first. In about 3 months, I'll have Huang He, Senior Chen Qi, and the others bring back the 30,000 members of the Heavenly Fate Legion. I'll arrange for them to stay here with you. Duan Yu nodded. Thankfully, she had set up several layers of concealment and defense talisman matrices on her private island, Snow Island, so the aftermath could be considered peaceful. She received Senior Chin-Chi's message 2 days ago, and everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Chapter 5036. There were 30,000 elites keeping watch on the snowy island. Even if Heavenly Fate's people wanted to attack the snowy island, they had to first consider whether this deal was worth it or not. Jojo, I'll send someone to escort you back. Arbor quickly shook her head and tilted her head. I'll use a teleportation talisman matrix. As long as I don't encounter any baddies who block my divine senses on the way, we'll set off tomorrow morning and reach the outskirts of Dragonflame City by sunset. The serpent was invigorated and hastily ran over to curry favor. Fierce girl, don't worry. As long as I'm by your side, no one can block your divine senses. Except for the condensing mirror, the serpent added in his mind. However, the sacred spirit of the condensing mirror had also disappeared at this time. It was probably with the Emolian brothers. Just now, the serpent didn't say anything when he sensed the presence of the divine realm opening on the little stoic's body. Presumably, the sudden disappearance of the Emolian brothers and the Peach Blossom brothers was closely related to the divine realm. Since they didn't want to reveal it, he also didn't pursue the matter. However, the juniors nowadays really had all kinds of mysterious treasures on them. It was truly breathtaking. Duan Yu glanced at the serpent and warned coldly, "You must be careful in everything you do. If anything happens to Jojo, you know what will happen." Zualanshan returned to his senses and inexplicably shuddered. He thought, why do I feel like the juniors nowadays are each more ruthless than the last? He pursed his lips and said, "Fierce girl, don't doubt me. I made a bet with the Peach Blossom brothers and lost a year's time. In this 1 year, I will stay by your side and protect you well. As a senior sacred beast, I naturally won't lie to a junior like you. We agreed on a year, so it's a year. In this 1 year, no matter where you go, I will accompany you. Even if you overturn the heavens, I will tidy things up properly for you." Arbor couldn't help but be startled. But speaking of this, he really shed bitter tears. Arbor didn't notice GC and the others beside her and twitched her mouth several times. The past was unbearable to recall. Zualanshan snorted and waved his hand. "You don't need to know that. You only need to know that I won't harm you. I will protect you and block everything for you. That's enough." Sir Jojo glanced at Snake Man a few times and suddenly felt that this guy seemed to be more pleasing to the eye. Since he had already said that he would protect her for a year and be her bodyguard, why would he do that? Then she was too embarrassed to think about revenge, nor could she gather Chio and the others to gang up on him. The snake person abruptly felt a chill drifting over his head, and he glanced at Xiao Mu in confusion. "All right then," the little stoic said aloofly with a cold expression. Since this fellow was so tactful, then she would reluctantly make peace with him for the time being. "Tomorrow morning, we will use the teleportation array to set off." Jojo and Xingho, Arbor's footsteps paused. Frowning, his voice was cold and merciless. "Those who kill me will go to hell before me." Duan Yu's lips curved, and he nodded with a smile. That night, news of Xingho's suicide by ingesting poison came from the prison. His Majesty issued a decree to confiscate the Marquis of Anqing's estate. All of the estate's wealth was used as military supplies to prepare for war. Although Xingho's family was pardoned from death, they were implicated by the Marquis and were exiled to the borders to cultivate dry land. The Marquis of Anqing's estate, which used to be incomparably glorious, declined overnight and was no longer the same as before. Chapter 5037. Early the next morning, Arbor bid farewell to Duan Yu and left by activating a transportation talisman matrix under Duan Yu's watchful gaze. Jojo's figure was far away in the blink of an eye. Duan Yu only felt as if something had been dug out of his heart, and he stood there in a daze for a long time. Until Aunt Yuan Zhen's voice was heard. "Miss Wu, you're a step too late. The young crown princess has already left using the transportation talisman matrix." "She left in such a hurry," Wu Ruame exclaimed. "Oh my, we agreed to go for a morning outing yesterday, so I waited outside the palace, but I didn't see the crown princess come out, so I entered the palace to take a look. Yuanjun couldn't help twitching her mouth as she inwardly mused, then you really waited for nothing. The young crown princess sleeps until the sun is high in the sky every day, so going for a spring outing can only wait until the afternoon, right? Furthermore, that day when you chatted with the crown princess for the entire afternoon, I truly didn't hear you mention the words morning. Waking up in the morning was very important, but the crown princess simply couldn't wake up in the morning. I even brought her fresh pears, so why did she leave? Wu Rome wrung her hands as she loudly grumbled, "Oh my, I haven't heard her finish telling me about Princess Wu Shuang yet." "Dolly, quickly return to the estate and pack your things." "Ah? Miss, where are we going?" her personal maidservant meekly asked. "Hey, is there a need to ask?" Wu Ruame loudly instructed. "Let's go, we're going to the Divine Province for a stroll. I hit it off with the crown princess at first sight, so how can she run away before we're done chatting? Really, quickly return home and pack your things. We're leaving immediately." "Oh, but miss, where are we going to find the crown princess in the Divine Province?" "You won't admit it even if I say you're stupid. Of course it's the imperial capital. If the crown princess isn't in the imperial capital, where else could she be?" When Duan Yu returned to his senses, he heard Wu Ruame's boisterous words, and his heart skipped a beat. Wu Ruame was going to find Charles, so why couldn't he go? It was such a simple thing to meet Jojo whenever he wanted to. Once he was done with the matters at hand, he would also go to Shenzhou to meet Jojo. On the other side, the rune array flashed, and Arbor walked out with GC, Old Zhou, and the others. He held an open map in his small hand and looked at it expressionlessly. The corner of Shen Wu's mouth twitched. He coughed lightly and said, "Crown Princess, our direction shouldn't be wrong. However, the teleportation is sometimes far and sometimes near. Sometimes it appears on the mountains and rivers, and sometimes it falls into the water. It's not very reliable." The corner of GC's eyes twitched, but she didn't say anything. Shen Wu continued, "Crown Princess, why don't we take a closer look at the map in your hands?" When they came out of the teleportation portal, Old Zhou stepped on a swordfish. Everyone was caught off guard and fell into the water one after another. Thinking back on it now, the expressions on their companions' faces were truly quite fascinating. The little crown princess didn't show any expression and merely humphed softly from her small nose. She flicked the talisman array in her hand, and the rune array enveloped them again. With a whoosh, everyone's mouths twitched, and they immediately disappeared on the spot. A dozen or so breaths later, everyone stepped out of the talisman array on guard, prepared to jump into water or fire. However, after the talisman array dispersed, they discovered a small flat slope in front of them. What entered their eyes was a barren field of withered grass. The little stoic picked up that map again and looked it up and down before saying aloofly, "Take a look." Chapter 5038. Shen Wu was at a loss for words. He thought to himself, why was the little crown princess looking at the map horizontally and vertically just now? She was looking all over the map, but in the end, she didn't understand it at all. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but cough. He pointed at a corner of the map and said, "Crown Princess, look. If we go any further, we should be at the 10-mile slope. According to the map, this 10-mile slope is 3 miles outside of Dragonflame City. I suggest, let's change to an air transportation spirit artifact and go there. We should be able to reach the imperial capital before sunset." GC, Old Zhou, and the others quickly nodded in agreement. What a joke. They could fly a few miles. There was no need to use that damn talisman array. The little crown princess thought for 2 seconds with her hands behind her back. Then, she nodded reluctantly. Shen Wu felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He hurriedly gave Old Zhou and the others a look. The latter understood and took out a pocket-sized air transportation spirit artifact. After injecting divine power, the spirit artifact rapidly expanded as though it was filled with air. Everyone entered the spirit artifact cabin one after another. After setting the route forward, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the little crown princess was sensible and didn't insist on using a transportation talisman array. Otherwise, it would really be a trap. Although this was a directional talisman array, The transportation distance was sometimes short and sometimes far. It wasn't easy to control. The little crown princess sat at the side with a stoic expression. Shen Wu was just about to speak to her when he heard the little crown princess say, "There's movement up ahead." Indeed, not long after, Shen Wu and the others heard the thunderous rumbling of iron hooves coming from below. Arbor drew an invisibility talisman in the air and pushed it outward. A purple talisman power flashed outside the entire spirit artifact cabin. The air transportation spirit artifact immediately disappeared from the sky. In next to no time, the dust from the 4 hooves completely covered the heavens and the earth. A large brown-furred wolf carrying a middle-aged short-bearded man wearing a battle helmet dashed below Arbor and the others' air transportation spirit artifact. The Vanguard Battalion reports that an air transportation spirit artifact of unknown origin has appeared in front of the slope. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes and looked around. Why is there nothing here? A young general beside him also couldn't help but look around curiously. Just now, when I was looking from afar, I seemed to have seen an air transportation spirit tool. There's no way it could fly so fast. General Hado. The young general approached the middle-aged general and said in a low voice, could it be that he panicked and abandoned his air transportation spiritual tool to escape after discovering that our wolf squad was attacking? The middle-aged general named Ha Duo snorted coldly and raised his hand. Search everywhere. Don't let go of any suspicious places. We must not let this person go to the royal manor in the outskirts and destroy our defenses. Once Grand State Preceptor Larry arrives, we'll make our move. At this moment, Xiao Mu and company were openly hiding above this Hajuo general's head, openly eavesdropping on the enemy's conversation. The human snake glanced at Xiao Mu strangely, a hint of shock surreptitiously hidden in his gaze. He kept pondering in his mind. He didn't expect this fierce girl's talisman skills to be so impressive. She could casually draw an invisibility talisman in the air and hide the entire air transportation spirit artifact. Not a single one of the many good-for-nothings below them noticed their whereabouts. It was obvious how formidable this little stoic was. After Hado ordered his men to search everywhere to no avail, he could only beat the gong to withdraw his troops. Arbor coldly watched the wolf squad retreat to the outskirts of Dragonflame City and said in a low voice, "Follow them and take a look." The kingdom of Duluo really dared to attack? How audacious! Chapter 5039. The flying spirit artifact circled in the air and quietly followed the Hajuo general back to the Wang Manor on the outskirts of the capital. This Wang Manor was basically under the control of the Duoluo army. Shen Wu was puzzled. This place is so close to Dragonflame City. How come the city guards know nothing about it? He had never heard of the Duoluo country before. He didn't know which small country it was. How come they suddenly had the courage to attack the capital of the Divine Prefecture? Arbor glanced down and drew several invisibility talismans in the air. She flicked them. The talismans immediately entered everyone's bodies. Let's go down and take a look. This matter was indeed strange. Wang Manor was located on the outskirts of Dragonflame City. It was less than 3 miles away. The Duoluo army had more than 5,000 people. How come they didn't know about such a big commotion? It could be seen that the city guards had either rebelled or met with misfortune. Arbor didn't want to think of the human heart as too complicated, but in reality, the human heart was the most unreliable thing in the world. Shen Wu quietly put away the flying spirit artifact and landed with Arbor and the others. The originally bustling Wang Manor was now closed in front of all the doors and a lifeless atmosphere. Arbor led Shen Wu and the others from Zualan Mountain past the decorated archway of Wang Manor and walked along the flagstone path. They walked for about 10 minutes. At the same time, Sir Jojo suddenly turned his head and met 2 gazes with a sharp gaze. A young woman was half leaning on the window and looking out. She suddenly felt a chill and hurriedly shrank her head back. Why did it feel like something ferocious had passed through the window just now? The woman patted her chest and took a deep breath. She felt that she might have been overthinking. Many unfamiliar cultivators had flooded into Wang Manor in large numbers in the wee hours of this morning. Her father-in-law was the mayor, but now he was being controlled by someone. Their entire family's lives were in the other's hands. They didn't dare to act rashly and could only obey orders. The other had the mayor order everyone to stay in their homes and not go out without orders. An entire morning had passed. Their entire family was on tenterhooks and didn't know what was going on. The room was dark and gloomy, and the 6 members of the mayor's family were huddled together at the table. Seeing the woman walk over, the mayor's wife hurriedly asked, "How is it outside?" "Nothing at all." The mayor's wife sighed. "I'm afraid this matter won't end well. If there's a chance later, you and Ahong will immediately take the children away." Clang! The door was kicked open, and Ha Duo and Gu Er walked in. Their cold aura entered the room, scaring the 2 young children. They quickly hid in the arms of the old woman. The mayor's wife tried her best to remain calm, but her heart was beating like a drum. The 2 generals were intimidating and exuded a murderous aura. It was not something that ordinary people like them could contend against. Holding a horsewhip in his hand, Guer grinned at the 2 children hypocritically. "Lord Mayor, we need you to stand out and gather all the townspeople. What exactly do you want?" The mayor braced himself and asked. "All of us in Wang Manor Town are honest and normal people. We have never made enemies. Shujadaran, why do you, Pia?" Guer's whip landed on the table and split it in half. What? The 2 children started to cry loudly. Chapter 50-40. The mayor's wife hurriedly covered the children's mouths with her hand and shrank back in horror. "Please, Lord Mayor. Now you can have everyone come out and go to the gathering." The old mayor stood up shakily, took out the sound-amplifying mystic weapon he usually used to summon people, and took a deep breath. There were about 400 to 500 people in Wangzhuang Town. At this time, they were all summoned to the gathering. Everyone didn't know the reason and looked at each other. Upon seeing this, Qiao Mu stealthily distributed transformation talismans to Mounts Wulan, Shen Wu, and the others. The group simply showed themselves openly and stealthily mixed into the crowd of normal citizens, gathering at the venue with the crowd of Royal Manor Town residents. Around the gathering, there were thousands of soldiers from the state of Daluo, all wearing short armor and red feathered helmets. The townspeople of Wangzhuang Town gathered together somewhat timidly. In the cold weather, even if there was a faint ray of sunlight on the horizon, everyone still felt cold in their hearts. Arbor stood in the crowd, looking left and right at the shriveled crowd. He suddenly felt as if he had returned to the Quoto village from several years ago. At that time, they were also this weak. When faced with the bullying of the Heavenly Tao sect, none of the villagers dared to speak. They only dared to watch silently, hiding on the side like walking corpses. They dared to be angry but didn't dare to speak. Today, it was still the same. In a different place, with a different group of people, nothing had changed. They were still a flock of lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Weakness was indeed the original sin. Arbor frowned and looked forward. That Daluo General Hajuo stood on a stone pier half the height of a person, staring at the townspeople of Wangzhuang Town below with bright eyes. He turned his head and gave his deputy general Gu Er a look. The young general immediately walked to the front of the crowd with half a whip and asked with a chuckle, "Lord Mayor, is everyone here?" The old mayor and his family stood at the front of the crowd. When he heard Gu Er's question, his body trembled and he nodded silently. Gu Er smiled. "Since everyone is here, let's bring them over." As soon as he finished speaking, there was the sound of iron chains swaying beside him. Everyone felt their hearts tighten as they subconsciously gathered closer to the center. Hua 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 hua. A chain as thick as an arm was dragged over from afar. Standing beside Arbor was a girl about her age, about 16 or 17 years old. Because of her nervousness, her round face was covered with fine beads of sweat. Arbor could clearly hear her rapid breathing, and it seemed that her heart was beating faster. "Ah!" the crowd suddenly exclaimed. Everyone looked along the long iron chain and saw 2 large iron cages more than a meter high being dragged over by 4 or 5 strong men. Clack, 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 clack. The friction between the cages and the ground produced a series of rough and ear-piercing sounds. In the cage, there were 2 monsters whose faces could not be seen clearly. Their hair was messy and drooped on their foreheads. A pair of small, blood-red eyes were staring at them through the cage. Arbor thoughtfully looked at the iron cage a few more times. Looking at the two zombies locked in the cage, one big and one small, he felt a sense of déjà vu looking at their figures. One of them seemed to be a boy. Wait, Arbor's eyes flashed, and his sharp gaze once again swept past the two monsters in the cage. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind. They seemed to be the Fong siblings he met on Lotus Pond Island. I worked overtime until 10 o'clock today, so I came back too late. I'll sleep first and make up for 2 more chapters tomorrow. Happy New Year. I still have to work overtime tomorrow, so I don't know when I'll be back. I'll probably make up for it later. Chapter 5041. The townspeople of Wangzhuang Town all looked terrified as they took a few steps back in unison. Many townspeople huddled together. Other than the sound of each other's heavy breathing, there seemed to be no other sound between heaven and earth in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the scene of 400 to 500 people was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. The girl next to Arbor was nervously pinching the corner of her clothes when she suddenly turned her head to glance at Arbor. In other people's eyes, Arbor currently looked like a woman in her early 30s with a face full of freckles. Arbor also couldn't do anything about this transformation talisman when her image became so terrible. This transformation talisman was too random. Depending on its mood, it could transform however it wanted. In any case, it couldn't escape the word ugly ant. The girl called out to Arbor timidly. Arbor instantly felt like fucking a dog, and her gaze swept coolly over the girl. Aunt? The exquisite and adorable Sir Jojo was actually called Aunt? Who's your aunt? Your whole family is your aunt. The round-faced girl didn't understand why Arbor was looking at her with such a strange gaze, and she whispered timidly, Aunt, W and we still escape? Arbor glanced at her. At a moment of life and death, naturally even if there's only a slim chance of survival, we still have to fight with our lives. The round-faced girl nodded and surreptitiously took out a wood-chopping knife from behind her waist. She muttered, Aunt, I think these people aren't decent people. Later, let's seize the moment and charge out. Arbor glanced at the kitchen knife in this fellow's hand, and the corner of her mouth secretly twitched. In the little stoic's opinion, it was enough to have a valiant heart that didn't fear death. At least among these people she was about to save, there were at least some who dared to come out and fight against fate. Zualanshan glanced at the thing in the iron cage and lowered his voice to ask Arbor, Xiao Qiao, what's in this cage? Why did it feel like the whole world had changed after he woke up from his hibernation for over 100 years? In the past, he had never seen such an ugly creature. It was howling and panting in the cage. It looked like a human, but not like a beast. It gave people an indescribable feeling. Arbor glanced at him and silently took out a book from his inner world. He patted it lightly in Zualanshan's hand and said, Study it when you have time. The world today is very different from before you hibernated. Zualanshan's hand inexplicably trembled, and a thought flashed through his mind. Does this stoic face have a special hobby of handing out pamphlets to people? He flipped open the booklet titled, Corpse Puppet Guide, and saw a picture of a rotting corpse on the first page. There was a small line of words on it. Beginner-level corpse puppet, likes to bite people, the speed at which its corpse poison spreads is low, and its walking speed is very slow. Zualanshan's hands trembled again. The zombie on the first page of the booklet was really lifelike, as if it was about to jump out of the paper. If he studied it in the middle of the night, his heart would probably be greatly affected. He hastily slapped the booklet shut and turned to give Jojo a kind smile. The little stoic glanced at him. These two in front of us have evolved to intermediate-level corpse puppets at most. However, 2 intermediate-level corpse puppets were enough to scare a group of mortals. When mortals saw such terrifying things, they would definitely be so scared that they wouldn't be able to walk. Chapter 5042. Just like now, when the townspeople saw them open the iron cages and drag out the 2 corpse puppets, they were so frightened that they couldn't stop screaming. The pale-faced women in the front row couldn't keep their legs steady and fell to the ground. The Fong siblings were sprawled on the ground, crawling on all fours, but their speed was very fast. Miss Fong passed through the crowd in an instant and roared at a fat woman who had fallen to the ground. The fat woman's eyes rolled back, and she actually fainted from fright. Ha ha! The mocking laughter of the Doruo soldiers came from all around, mixed with a few curses. So this is all there is to the people under the feet of the Emperor of the Divine Prefecture. 2 mid-level corpse puppets scared them to this extent. They really are a bunch of flowers in a greenhouse, so well protected. Could it be that they never even knew what corpse puppets looked like before? After the mockery, there was a wave of unbridled laughter, one after another. Arbor glanced at these Doruo soldiers from the corner of her eyes and sneered. The small hand by her side suddenly moved slightly. Hundreds of thousands of fiery evil mosquitoes suddenly spread out from between her fingers, flying in all directions. At first, the crowd only felt as if some mosquitoes and flies were flying in front of their eyes, and didn't pay too much attention. But with the cry of a soldier, a fiery prelude began. This person suddenly spat out a ball of fire from his chest, and it inexplicably spread to the people around him. It was so fast that it caught people off guard, and there was no time to defend. The first soldier who was enveloped by the fire quickly shattered into a pile of bones, falling to the ground with a bang. He was deader than dead in a matter of minutes. This unforeseen event not only scared the 400 to 500 Royal Manor townspeople, but also scared the Doruo soldiers to death. This fire inexplicably started burning from within, burning outwards. It was as if a fire had been poured on a person's heart, abruptly igniting it. The crowd didn't know what was going on, and became more and more nervous, unable to control themselves. General Doha shouted angrily, "Don't panic. An enemy has sneaked in." The young deputy general, Gu Er, was experienced and knowledgeable. He immediately sensed that something was wrong. The young man ordered loudly, "Don't panic. Pay attention to whether there are any strange objects around you. Activate your defensive profound artifacts first." Defend. Defend. The soldiers of the Luo kingdom shouted in panic. One after another, they activated their defensive Xian weapons and looked around. Gu Er's judgment was very accurate. He immediately discovered that there seemed to be many tiny mosquitoes around the Doro soldiers. Mosquito! It's a mosquito! Damn it! Activate your defensive barriers. Don't let these mosquitoes get close to you. General Hajuo was so angry that his nose was almost crooked when he saw his soldiers being targeted by these tiny mosquitoes one after another, and dying from the inside out one after another. This was truly an unforeseen event. Before the main forces arrived, they planned to camp here for 1 or 2 days. Unexpectedly, before the battle had even begun, his soldiers had inexplicably attracted a swarm of mosquitoes, and dozens of them had been killed. This really wasn't a good sign. Could this be a sign that the future siege would not be easy to fight? General Hajuo's face darkened as he loudly berated his soldiers. Chapter 5043. Don't roast them with fire. These mosquitoes don't seem to be afraid of fire. Use ice. Freeze them. Yes, freeze them. As soon as the general finished speaking, several streams of water shot towards the fiery evil mosquitoes flying around in the air. The streams of water quickly froze into icicles in the air, but only a few fiery evil mosquitoes could be frozen. These little mosquitoes moved very quickly, flapping their wings and flying away. It was a fool's dream to want to freeze all of them. General Hajuo saw the mess in front of him and could not help but take a deep breath. He shouted angrily, "A bunch of good-for-nothings. I told you to freeze them, didn't you hear me? Faster, faster." Icicles. Crackle. An icicle formed by condensing water into ice exploded in front of the general, turning into ice crystals that fluttered in the air. The general was so angry that he shouted, "I told you to train hard every day, but you can't even do something as simple as condensing water into ice. When you have nothing to do, you brag to me that you're a great spiritualist, a great spiritualist. When I really need you to fight, you're useless." While he was cursing nonstop, Gu Er walked up with a serious expression. "General, these mosquitoes must have been released by someone. We must get rid of the spy in the crowd as soon as possible. Otherwise, these fiery evil mosquitoes will keep coming. If they were resting in their camp and secretly released a group of fiery evil mosquitoes in the middle of the night, General Hajuo could not help but shrink his neck. When the soldiers received the general's signal, they hurriedly raised the clubs in their hands and swung them at the crowd. "We can't waste any more time," General Hajuo said coldly. "Since these people are unwilling to cooperate with us, then we'll deal with them together." Originally, he had wanted to use a portion of them to feed the 2 mid-level zombie puppets, while the rest of them would be selected to be strong or clever to be properly modified. But now, it seemed that there was no time. He could not let this continue. Otherwise, he did not know how many of his soldiers would be left under the torture of these fiery evil mosquitoes. If he could not find the spy, he would kill everyone present. They were just a bunch of stupid Chinese anyway. It did not matter how many he killed. A cold light flashed in Hajuo's eyes. As soon as he gave the order, a few hot-blooded soldiers of the country of Doro raised the iron spears in their hands and charged at the women and children in the front row. If it had sunk, how could those people still be alive? The townsfolk of Wangzhuang town immediately cried out in alarm. More than a dozen young and strong men were looking everywhere for suitable weapons, wanting to risk their lives to fight against the vicious soldiers of the country of Duoluo. At this moment, a loud boom was heard. It was as if a thunderclap had exploded on the ground. All of a sudden, the group of soldiers in the front row exploded. This time, it was as if a flower had bloomed, and the ground was dyed red. The explosion of the divine power ball shocked everyone present. More than a dozen soldiers of the kingdom of Daluo, who were caught off guard, were blown away. Their limbs were crippled as they hung on the stone pillars. General Hajuo's pupils constricted as he shouted, "Defensive shield! Defensive shield!" Gu Er roared as well. Swoosh! In front of Hajuo and Gu Er, 3 rows of shield walls immediately appeared, protecting them firmly behind them. Hajuo was cursing in his heart. This battle is a disastrous loss. Chapter 5044. The worst thing was that he didn't even know who the enemy was or where they were hiding. At this moment he still couldn't tell. So many soldiers had died in the vanguard. How was he going to explain this to the state preceptor? When he thought of the state preceptor's stern face, General Hajuo couldn't help but shudder. His entire body trembled. At this moment, rows of Doruo soldiers, from half-squatting to standing upright, surrounded the two of them. They erected hundreds of defensive shields in front of them and roared in unison. "Pay attention to your defenses." The anger in General Hajuo's heart was about to materialize into sword light. "Which friend is stirring up trouble in our small town? Why don't you show yourself for a chat?" As soon as Ha Duo finished his sentence, he saw a ball of divine power flying towards them. It was like a ball of divine power was being tossed around. With a loud boom, it smashed into their shields. Countless Doruo soldiers used their bodies to withstand the explosion of the ball of divine power. The soldiers in the front row who were bearing the most weight were immediately affected by the explosion of the ball of divine power. They all spat out mouthfuls of blood and barely supported their shield-bearing bodies. Hajuo's face darkened as he looked at the Wangzhuang townsfolk huddled together. "Fire the arrows." He wanted to see if this person would still hide among a bunch of useless commoners and fish in troubled waters. He was trying to force them out of hiding. Behind the defensive shields, hundreds of archers immediately surged forward. They all knocked their bows and aimed in the direction of the townsfolk. The old mayor trembled as he pushed his children and grandchildren beside him. He cried out in alarm, "Go, go! Go quickly!" The townsfolk finally reacted. When they saw that the enemy was about to shoot them indiscriminately, they hurriedly scattered in all directions. They stumbled and crawled as they fled for their lives. Thump, thump, thump. A dozen or so townsfolk fled a few meters before they suddenly realized that there were 4 invisible barriers erected around the meeting place. Commoners like them couldn't see clearly at all. At this moment, they were like a group of trapped beasts, trapped in these 4 tall invisible barriers. The round-faced girl let out a cry of alarm and kicked the barrier in front of her. He kicked until his feet hurt, but he still couldn't push away that invisible barrier. At this time, Many people rushed to the girl's side, kicking, hitting, biting, and headbutting. However, no matter how hard they tried, they were still firmly trapped in this predicament, unable to resist the cruel fate. Was this the fate of ordinary people? Don't do anything yet. Look. The round-faced girl suddenly tugged at the arm of a woman beside her. The woman was holding a child who was only a few years old. Her hair was disheveled and she looked like she had gone mad. Now that he was pulled by the round-faced girl, his mind became a little clearer. He turned his head to look in the direction she was pointing. The place where 400 to 500 townspeople had gathered was now left with only 7 people after they scattered like birds and beasts. 7 men and women with crude appearances. They looked very ordinary. Judging from their appearance, these 7 people were about 30 years old. The one standing at the front was a short woman with a round face full of freckles. "Who are you people?" Ha Duo frowned as he looked coldly at the 7 people. Were they the ones who secretly released the fire mosquitoes and smashed people with the god power pearls? They really looked like a group of village women. There was nothing special about them at all. No wonder no one could recognize them when they were mixed in with the crowd. Chapter 50-45. You're finally willing to come out. Ha Duo sneered. I thought you wanted to continue mingling with the crowd. He raised his hand to instruct the archers to aim cautiously at the 7 people on the battlefield. Do you have any more god power pearls to throw? Ha Duo snorted, expressing his disdain and dissatisfaction very purely. I don't need to use god power pearls to deal with trash like you, Arbor said coldly as she hooked her finger forward. She just needed to summon a holy beast. Standing behind her, Zualanshan couldn't help but twitch his mouth. When the little stoic was exquisite and adorable in the past, she would definitely look very good doing this, but now she was like a chubby little oil barrel. Her face was full of pockmarks and freckles, so she looked very ugly no matter what she did. Suddenly, 2 figures flashed, and 2 slender and naturally handsome figures appeared next to the little stoic. Jojo, are you summoning hubby? The little stoic looked back in bewilderment. A pair of deformed mung bean eyes suddenly lit up. Her lotus had finished absorbing ancient Emolien's soul pearl? But that was to be expected. Under the main planet's 12-fold time flow, the absorption of soul pearls should be very fast. Jojo, why didn't you summon me for a fight? This venerable one's hands and feet are about to turn stiff from idleness. The venerable peach blossom immortal glanced at the other side. He saw a large group of Luo soldiers using defensive shields to form 3 human walls and vigilantly watching them. Arbor was about to walk toward them when she suddenly looked down at her appearance. She pinched her chubby bucket-like waist and instantly felt like the sky was falling down. What was going on? Why did she become so ugly? She inexplicably felt like she didn't even have the right to walk to them. She couldn't use this damn transformation talisman next time. How could it randomly transform and not recover within 12 hours? Before she compared herself to Zualanshan and the other ugly people, she didn't feel any harm when she stood next to them. But now the harm immediately came. Arbor stopped in her tracks. She couldn't stand Emolien's tendency to float to her side. She didn't move, so those 2 people moved over. Jojo, what's wrong? What was with the little stoic's expression? She was looking at them oddly. Jojo, your husband came out of closed-door training early. Don't tell me you're not surprised at all? Emolien hooked her little hand naturally as he spoke. In the end, the little stoic abruptly slapped his hand away. Before Emolien could react, this fellow gestured to her current appearance and asked with a sullen expression, "Did you guys not notice how different I am compared to usual? Were these 2 blind?" Not a single one of them was surprised to see her like this. What's the big deal? Emolien grabbed her hand and said nonchalantly, "You're my Jojo anyway. No matter what you become, you're still my Jojo." Zualanshan, whose mouth was stuffed with dog food, rolled his eyes and roared, "Are we still fighting or not?" Just looking at it made him sick and annoyed. For a childless old bachelor like him who had been a bachelor for several hundred years, he seriously couldn't understand what was so good about a wife. Women were creatures who liked to make a fuss and shout all day long. They were so noisy and annoying. In any case, he wouldn't find a wife in this lifetime. Fight. Arbor nodded and pointed forward with 2 fingers. Zhualanshan, you were so powerful when you attacked us at Forget River. Now, you should use 1/10 of your strength to deal with them. Chapter 5046. Why are you still harping on the river of forgetfulness? It could have been over long ago. Zhualanshan suddenly leaped forward, revealing his beast form. He had a human body and a snake tail, and his magnificent scales rubbed against the ground. With a flick of his tail, his robust tail heavily smashed into the human shield wall with a bang. A dozen or so sounds of blood being spat out were heard in succession. Zhualanshan's snake tail smashed down and immediately sent 2 dual Luo soldiers flying. Although there were people rushing up from behind to fill in the gaps, the entire shield wall was already on the verge of collapsing due to the overly chaotic movements. Hajuo sharply stared in Arbor's direction. He took a deep breath and shouted with a gloomy expression, "This human snake's cultivation is very high. Even I can't see through his realm." Damn it, they were originally stationed at Wangzhuang town to wait for Grand State Preceptor Larry's arrival. The defenses in this area had already been set up, so they only needed to follow the Grand State Preceptor's orders and capture some people to transform while waiting. Think about it. How delightful would it be to turn those foolish citizens of the Divine Province into a bunch of brainless monsters that only knew how to obey orders and let them bite each other as they pleased? But now their plan to cultivate zombies had just begun, and it seemed like it would be interrupted by these people in front of them. They had to hold on until Grand State Preceptor Larry came to rescue them. General Hajuo silently repeated this 3 times in his mind before revealing a stiff smile. Friends, don't listen to his nonsense. Zhualanshan. Arbor habitually gave orders. When the latter heard the little stoics shout, he also inexplicably charged forward out of habit. As he charged, he inwardly cursed himself as a dog. He didn't expect himself to become so docile and obedient after following the stoic for a short while. The human snake charged into the enemy's camp like a giant descending. Wherever its long tail swept past, it swept away everything in its path. No one in Duo Luo could withstand this sacred beast's attack, and they all retreated step by step. Mo Lien grasped Arbor's small hand and said softly, "These people brazenly set up a stronghold in Wangzhuang, so they should be relying on talisman formations." Arbor nodded slightly and glanced at the transparent barrier around them. What kept the townsfolk out of the meeting place was the defensive barrier that had been set up. She had been somewhat curious since the beginning. This talisman grandmaster had spent a lot of money to set up such a large defensive wall, but why didn't he show himself? She smashed them with the divine power bead and asked the snake to bully them like this, but she still couldn't force this talisman master to show himself. It could be imagined that this person's relationship with the country of Daluo shouldn't be that good. It didn't matter. She was just curious about talisman masters. Every time she met a talisman master, she always thought that it would be best to have a talisman competition with them. This way, she would be able to have a better understanding of her own talisman skills. She silently practiced according to the golden talisman Jade Tome. Most of the time, she felt too lonely. If he could have a few sparring partners, he would feel that it would be good. In fact, whoever became her sparring partner would have 8 lifetimes of bad luck. This fellow used the long-lost talisman techniques from the golden talisman Jade Tome to crush others. Every time she was done, she would feel that the other party was too weak and reveal a regretful expression. Ever since this fellow's reputation as a talisman master spread throughout the 3 provinces, very few people wanted to compete with her in talismans. No one was a masochist. Zhualan Mountain snake tail swept past, and the power was like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, instantly crushing the defensive shield formation. The 4th watch made up for the 2nd watch, and the 6th watch was completed. Chapter 5047. Many of the Luo soldiers were rolling on the ground as they screamed in pain. General Hajuo's face darkened as he said in a low voice, "Retreat." He felt that if they continued to stay here, the 5,000 soldiers under his command would all die here. They would all be destroyed by someone. In order to preserve their strength, they had to endure for now for the sake of long-term benefits. Hajuo gritted his teeth and raised his hand. He whispered to the young General Gu-er, "State Preceptor Larry might not be able to make it on time. We must retreat quickly." If they retreated now, they could still save 2,000 to 3,000 soldiers. If they continued to dawdle, no matter how many people they had, they would not be enough to be wiped out by the snake. As he spoke, the snake smashed a few more Luo soldiers to death. Hajuo saw that something was wrong and hurriedly shouted, "Retreat! Retreat! Retreat!" Gu-er's face was cold as he bellowed. The panicked soldiers of the Luo kingdom hurriedly fled backward, like flies that had been pinched off, disorderly. The entire banquet hall was instantly filled with a cacophony of shouts. It was a complete mess. At this time, no one had the time to care about others. They were too busy running for their lives. The soldiers fled like a swarm of bees, but they were soon blocked by 4 invisible barriers. General Haddo leaped onto a muscular black wolf, and the rest of the Doro wolf team hurriedly followed suit. Following their general, they rushed to the transparent defensive wall. Hajuo took out a set of jade talismans from his sleeves and threw them forward. Dozens of jade talismans formed a circle in the air and scattered in all directions. The barrier in front of them disappeared without a trace. Arbor stood there expressionlessly and watched Hajuo's series of actions. He sneered in his heart. It seemed that this talisman array master was a cautious person. He did not show himself and only gave the general the key to open and close the talisman array. But one thing was for sure. This master must be hiding nearby and watching. After all, anyone would be curious after setting up such a large talisman array. "Let's go." When Haddo saw that the barrier in front of him had opened, he patted the wolf's head without another word. He rode on the large black wolf and charged forward. His speed was so fast that even the young General Gu-er, who was following closely behind him, could not keep up with his speed. General Ha Duo had left them a short distance behind. The soldiers of the Kingdom of Doro all followed closely behind Captain Wolf, running without thinking. They only wanted to get far away from that crazy snake's attack range. This human snake was simply unparalleled. Without a second word, it would smash anyone it saw. Wherever its huge tail swept past, almost everyone would be turned into a pile of meat paste. "Quick!" Gu-er patted the wolf's back and urged loudly. There was a trace of anxiety in his eyes. He knew very well that Grandmaster Chu's talisman array was quite powerful. Even if he had the key to open the defensive wall, it would only take him a few minutes to pass through. After a few minutes, the defensive wall would close up again, sealing the remaining people inside. Gu-er snorted coldly, a hint of ridicule flashing in his eyes. At that time, it would be like catching a turtle in a jar. As long as Grandmaster Chu sent them on their way outside the talisman array, they would have a good time. Apart from that human snake whose realm could not be determined, everyone else would be in for a bad time. Chapter 5048. The Kingdom of Luo's soldiers followed Wolf Troop as they charged out of the gap in the defensive wall. They didn't even turn their heads or dare to take another look behind them as they continued to dash forward. Zualanshan was a bit dumbfounded. He slithered to Arbor's side with his snake tail and asked in confusion, "Are we going to let them leave just like that? How's that possible?" The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal rolled his eyes at him. "Of course our Jojo has a backup plan." Zualanshan nodded with a sluggish expression and said, "Let me think, the little stoic isn't an open-minded person. How could she let these people leave just like that?" Arbor turned to glare at him. Mo Lien's mouth twitched, and he rebuked Zualanshan with a taut face, "Don't speak if you don't know how to speak." Mutes like to talk, and every time they spoke, it always sounded off. Actually, Zualanshan's original intention was to say that the little stoic was someone who repaid kindness with kindness and enmity with vengeance, so she shouldn't have let that General Hajuo leave just like that. He felt that this action didn't seem like the little stoic's personality. In the end, his words took a 180-degree turn, and he was referring to this person who didn't use words to convey his meaning. Zualanshan shut his mouth aggrievedly, but he was very puzzled on the inside. This little girl was truly too difficult to handle. Like the weather in March, that little face of hers really changed on a whim. She was fine just now, but now she immediately tensed up. Ignore him, he's uncultured. Mo Lien pulled his wife's hand and said quietly, later, we'll find him a teacher and properly educate him on popular culture. Tell him not to use these idioms carelessly in the future. Arbor pursed his small mouth and nodded reluctantly. She looked up at her husband and then lowered her head to look at herself, a faint trace of worry rising in her heart. Her current appearance as a fat winter melon, why did she feel so disgusted standing next to her husband? The little stoic pulled a long face and pushed the man. Move over a bit. His Highness the Crown Prince blinked and looked at his wife in incomprehension. But not really compatible. How could it not be? Crown Prince Mo abruptly reached out and picked up his wife. Wife, you match me no matter what you look like. Arbor widened his deformed beady eyes and glared at him angrily. He raised his little hand and smacked him on the head. Don't mess around. I'm not fooling around. Prince Mo blinked and lowered his head to rub her hair. We've been married for so many years, Jojo. Before he could finish his sentence, he felt a force pushing against Jojo's lower abdomen, trying to push him away. Mo Lien was shocked and didn't dare to resist. She could only allow the force to push her back 2 steps. She glanced at her daughter-in-law who was 2 steps away with an aggrieved expression. Arbor couldn't help but want to laugh. He raised his hand to touch his stomach and snorted. Baby Mo doesn't like you. This was not the first time he had pushed his father away. The pitiful His Highness the Crown Prince despised him so much even before his child was born. On the other side, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal truly couldn't stand it anymore. He patted Zhualanshan next to him and said, let's go ahead and take a look. Those people should be back by now. Which people should be back by now? Zhualanshan followed him in bewilderment. They didn't go far before they saw dust swirling in the distance. A large pack of black wolves was carrying a group of panic-stricken Doruo soldiers as they retreated. It was as if there was a ghost behind them. Chapter 5049. The group of people fled in all directions, not caring about their image at all. Some even crawled 3 times with each step and rolled on the ground, as if their legs were so weak that they couldn't even lift them up. Zhualanshan was baffled. He looked at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal in confusion. What's wrong with him? As soon as he finished speaking, he saw a large swarm of things rushing over from behind the Luo soldiers. From afar, it looked like a black ocean, making one's scalp tingle uncontrollably. The rolling little sand scorpions rushed over in great jubilation. Like a tide, they surrounded the soldiers of the kingdom of Daluo. Soon, the thousands of Luo soldiers, as well as Ha Duo and Gu Er's group, were all trapped in a tight encirclement. They kept moving forward, shrinking the encirclement. Fuck, what are these things? Zhualanshan hurriedly retreated a few steps, his scalp tingling. Boom, 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 boom. The stone slabs around them suddenly flew up and stacked on top of each other, quickly building 4 high walls around them. They rotated noisily, trapping everyone in these stone slabs. Ha Duo and his group's eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. They cautiously moved left and right, looking back and forth. They saw that the original invisible defensive wall had been replaced by stone slabs. These stone slabs that had suddenly erupted from the ground were now like moving city walls, stacked up from top to bottom, left to right, trapping everyone firmly in this area. The townspeople of Wangzhuang town were huddled in a corner. The 400 to 500 people wanted nothing more than to shrink into a speck of dust, not wanting to attract the attention of these people in front of them. These cultivators could easily destroy the heavens and the earth. The entire town could be razed to the ground by them. They hoped that the immortals' fight wouldn't affect them. In the eyes of these cultivators, the commoners of Wangzhuang town were probably ants. Arbor looked coldly at General Ha Duo. The latter rode on the big black wolf and met her eyes. He couldn't help but be intimidated by the cold light in her eyes, and his heart trembled slightly. Gu Er wasn't as calm as Ha Duo. He couldn't help but shout when he saw the scene before him, "Don't think you can trap us like this. Grand State Preceptor Larry is almost here with his men. Once our main forces arrive, all of you will die." Grand Preceptor Larry, Grand Preceptor Larry. When all the soldiers of the country of Doruo heard this person's name, it was as if they were injected with chicken blood. They clenched their fists and shouted out in an uproar. Arbor waved his hand and released a cloud of poison powder. The voices of the Doruo soldiers immediately stopped. Everyone was speechless. "You're so long-winded," Arbor said impatiently. "Search his soul and see when that Grand Master Lila will roll over. If he was fast, he could wait for him here and catch them all in one fell swoop. If there were still a few more days of travel, then there was no need to wait. Who would have the time to wait here all day for them to attack?" Mo Lien really wanted to remind his wife that she called him Lali the Great State Preceptor, not Lila. However, the impatient expression on his wife's face made him silently give up. Forget about this kind of small matter. Whatever his wife says is right. His wife can call him whatever she wants. I don't think there's a need to search his soul. Zualanshan frowned and said with a firm expression, "There are no signs of any large army within a radius of several hundred miles." Chapter 50-50. He's a liar. Jojo, he's lying to you, he's lying to you. No one came here at all. He's just stalling for time. What Grand Preceptor Lila? There's no such person. Zualanshan hurriedly slandered. Damned liar. Arbor flew into a rage when he heard this. He slapped the stupefied Gu Er across the air. How dare you lie to Jojo? Arbor slapped Gu Er's face in anger. Gu Er's face immediately tilted heavily to the left. 5 fingerprints appeared on his face. He was still in a daze from the slap and had yet to react. Prince Mo hurriedly shouted, "Jojo, don't move. Let me do it." As he spoke, he had already flown over like a rabbit. While he landed a dozen punches on Gu Er, he didn't forget to turn around and send a flying kiss to his expressionless wife, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, who was standing at the side, couldn't help but raise his hand to cover his face. He thought to himself, Emolien's skin is getting thicker and thicker. Now it's getting worse. Acting cute, my foot. Just looking at it makes my eyes burn. Arbor was speechless. What should I do when my husband has no bottom line? However, my husband looks so good when he smiles. He's like a flower that needs to be cared for and nurtured. He'll definitely grow stronger and stronger in the future. Jojo has to work hard to nurture him. He can't let the flower grow crooked. While he was pondering, student Mo had already landed dozens of punches, knocking the unlucky Gu Er off the wolf's back. He fell to the ground in a tragic manner. His tumble caused his head to land on the dirt floor with no stone tiles on his face. When he ate a mouthful of dust, his nose, mouth, and face were all broken. Gu Er howled miserably several times as he struggled to get up, but Crown Prince Mo swiftly kicked him down with a swift kick. Gu Er's eyes stung. He had the urge to cry. Oh my God, who can save me? What if I encounter a lunatic with extremely strong killing power? Arbor coughed softly and waved his hand. Stop. Listen to what he has to say. Mo Lien stealthily retracted her long leg and lowered her head to look at Gu Er, who had been trampled into the mud by her. She snorted and said, Don't pretend to be dead. If you continue to pretend, I'll really kill you. Everyone was speechless. Gu Er struggled to raise his head. He looked extremely miserable. Half of his face was covered in bruises, and his eyes were almost squeezed into 2 slits. Grand State Preceptor Larry's, his original plan was to stop Wang Zhuangjin today, Gu Er said in a trembling voice, his face full of helplessness. This time, he didn't dare to speak carelessly. After all, in the other party's camp, other than the extremely powerful Snake Man, this crazy person in front of him was also very powerful. Gu Er lay there and looked up at the other party. He couldn't help but feel that this psychopath's aura and consciousness were so strong that he could crush him with just a finger. Even an ant is nothing more than this, Gu Er thought dejectedly. Facing such a powerful person, he really couldn't muster up the slightest thought of resisting. Arbor sniffed and thought for a moment. You mean your leader didn't keep the appointment? Yes, esteemed madam. Gu Er nodded and answered honestly. Mo Lien suddenly frowned. Arbor had interacted with him for a long time and was familiar with his words and actions. Seeing his frown, he knew that something was wrong. He quickly walked over and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" Mo Lien nodded gravely. "These people deliberately stayed here to delay us." Chapter 50-51. Arbor was a smart person who grasped the gist of things. He immediately understood after hearing Mo Lien's words. As it turned out, that Grand Preceptor Lila purposely left these cannon fodder here to delay them. Therefore, this Lila had actually long calculated that they would definitely rush back to deal with the situation in Dragon Flame City after hearing about it. He purposely set up an extremely conspicuous stronghold at the foot of the imperial capital to lure them here as a delaying tactic? Your Highness, then let's hurry back to the city now? Shen Wu hastily asked. If something happened to Dragon Flame City, the entire Divine Province would be shaken, and the current peaceful days would no longer exist. As a citizen of the Divine Province, he had long been accustomed to the current peace and prosperity. He truly didn't wish for anyone to disrupt the current good times. This tiny kingdom of Daluo dared to scheme against the imperial capital of the Divine Province. What kind of confidence supported him to do such a foolish thing? Arbor silently took out a transportation talisman matrix. "Let's go!" GC, Old Zhou, and the others suddenly twitched their mouths, and they all revealed bitter expressions. The little crown princess was going to activate the directional dam transportation mode again this time. They hoped it wouldn't directly transport them to the enemy's main camp. Hu Jinchen chuckled mischievously and flashed to Arbor's side. "Jojo, I like this transportation talisman matrix the most. We don't have to walk a long way and arrive in the blink of an eye. It's effortless." Arbor nodded in agreement. At the same time, he glanced at GC and the others in confusion. The transportation talisman matrix this darling made was so fast and convenient. Why did these people look constipated when they saw her take out the transportation talisman matrix? Could it be that this transportation talisman matrix wasn't fast and stable? Jojo, it's their stupidity. They don't know what's good for them. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal saw through the little stoic's thoughts with a glance and walked up with a grin. "Let's go." Then these people, Arbor turned to look at Hajuo's group, whose expressions were unsightly. These small soldiers of Daluo were completely defenseless in front of this humanoid sacred beast of Mount Swollen. So as long as they wanted to, they could annihilate all these people here. Haduo stared at the little stoic nervously. He truly didn't expect Grand State Preceptor Larry to be so deceitful as to leave them here to stall for time for him. The Grand State Preceptor had treated them as abandoned pawns from the very beginning, leaving them here to die. Mo Lien glanced indifferently at Haduo and the others. "Settle down in this array formation first, Jojo. Tell Tong to escort these people back. As for how to deal with these prisoners of war, that was for the Emperor to worry about." The Crown Prince expressed that he and his wife were too lazy to care. Arbor nodded and drew several binding talismans in the air. With a flick of his little hand, he pushed them into the surrounding air. A double confinement glyph formation was set up on the originally solid defensive wall. The Snake Man was dumbfounded. He turned to look at Arbor and said, "I have a name. My name is Zolanshan. Leave a wisp of your soul remembrance here and watch over them." Arbor didn't waste words with him and got straight to the point. With a wisp of Zulanshan's soul guarding this place, even if Hajuo's group wanted to make a move, they couldn't possibly hide it from the Snake Man's eyes. "Got it." The Snake Man pursed his lips and pulled out a wisp of his soul remembrance to leave inside the confinement glyph formation. With the Snake Man guarding this place, Hajuo, Ghoul, and the others couldn't possibly escape. Chapter 50-52. Haduo drooped his head dejectedly. He was currently still straddling that large black wolf, but this wolf wasn't as fierce as before. Under the endless pressure of a human-shaped sacred beast, the wolf's head also completely drooped. It sprawled on the ground and whimpered, its voice sounding like a kitten or puppy, comical and pitiful. Arbor tossed aside the transportation talisman matrix and led the Crown Prince's group forward a few steps. Everyone's figures were immediately enveloped by the light of transportation, and they disappeared from the talisman matrix with a whoosh. After everyone's figures disappeared, A wretched and skinny old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks appeared outside the defensive wall. He raised his bony hand that was as withered as a chicken's claw and lightly touched the thick layer of defensive wall. He couldn't help but mutter to himself, "Such powerful talisman techniques." There were even double confinement talisman matrices set up inside this defensive wall. Such extravagance truly wasn't something a minor talisman practitioner could do. This person's gaze involuntarily flickered, and a complicated expression flitted across his eyes. It was a pity that such a young and talented little girl couldn't be used by them. It truly was a pity that she died. Just as he thought this, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He abruptly turned his head and met a pair of beady eyes head-on. The pitch-black light was like the stars in the night sky, sparkling with a dense halo. Chu Chengfei practically made a prompt decision and made a judgment in less than a second. He scooped up a handful of red powder and sprinkled it at the little stoic's head. "Jojo!" Emo Lien and Hu Shichen's faces simultaneously darkened. They pushed forth layers of water-like energy, directly deflecting the poison powder Master Chu sprinkled in front of Arbor. Arbor's eyes instantly narrowed sharply, and he sized up the man in front of him. "Who are you?" "You give people a sense of familiarity." Arbor raised his hand to block Emo Lien and Hu Shichen's attacks, and he sized up the person in front of him again. "I remember you." Her voice was faint, and in Chu Chengfei's eyes, it was as if she was a malicious spirit that walked out of hell. "When you poisoned me, you also quickly threw out a puppet charm. Did you think I didn't see it?" In fact, Arbor had already discovered Master Chu's scheme the moment he made his move. The poison was just a cover. The talisman that made people lose their minds was the real trump card. "You are that poison master and charm master?" Arbor said coldly. "You are from the Clear Sky sect." Chu Chengfei shuddered. "You were the one who poisoned and cursed Shagua and his team during the Shuntian school tournament." Miss Chiao had a good memory, but she really couldn't remember many people. Especially at that banquet, she had only swept a glance at most of the talented scholars and beauties she had bumped into. She might not be able to remember many of their faces and names. However, if you were to say that she had a bad memory, she could remember everything that had happened so many years ago clearly. As long as someone had tried to kill her, as long as she had caught the person's weak point, she would never forget it. She remembered all of them deeply and would not miss a single detail. "Your disciple calls you Master Chu," Arbor said coldly. "Master Chu, the Clear Sky sect is indeed under Hall Master Mu of Tianyunha." What a Mu Qingya! She was already half dead as an experimental subject on Snow Island, but she still hadn't given up on her evil intentions. "Add more tomorrow." "Sleep first." "Add more tomorrow." "Maybe 8. Chapter 50-53. Seize him. Arbor pointed at Chu Chengfei with a cold glint in her eyes. She was going to personally interrogate this filthy thing. Although Zhuo Lanshan was baffled and completely couldn't understand what Sir Jojo was saying, his reaction speed was very nimble. Once Sir Jojo gave the order, he immediately charged forward on his own accord. At the same time, a ruthless glint shot out of Chu Chengfei's eyes, and he shouted, "Bring it on!" In the blink of an eye, Chu Chengfei flung out several talismans glowing with purple light from his pocket. He flicked the talismans open, and his figure instantly disappeared from everyone's sight. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's jaw nearly dropped, and he muttered, He ran away? What kind of master was this? Where was his shame? Did he have no shame as a master? He ran away just like that and didn't even have the courage to confront Jojo. Moreover, when this person shouted before running away, everyone thought he was about to explode and make some big move, but in the end Emolien twitched his mouth, and he lowered his head to glance at his wifey. However, his wifey's expression was very calm, as if she wasn't the least bit surprised or angry about Chu Chengfei's escape. She suddenly extended a finger and extended a second finger, then a third. When the third finger appeared, everyone only saw a flash of light before their eyes. That idiot Chu Chengfei returned with a bewildered expression. This idiot stood in front of the serpent man and stared at him in the eye. Then, he crossed his arms in front of his chest and roared with a flushed face, "Bring it on, little one!" He disappeared again. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't resist slapping his thigh and guffawing. Fuck, what was wrong with this person? If you wanted to escape, then escape. Why did you have to shout so loudly before escaping? Was this to encourage yourself or to show off? Mo Lien's mouth twitched, and he lowered his head to look at his wifey. He saw that she didn't bat an eyelid and continued to extend one finger after another. When she extended the third finger, sure enough, Chu Qingfei, this old fellow, returned again. With a swish, when this old man appeared in front of the Serpent Man again, the Serpent Man was on guard this time. He kept looking at the little stoic with his head tilted. When he saw the little stoic raise her third finger, he was prepared to attack at any time. Therefore, the moment the light and shadow flashed in front of him, the serpent's huge tail swung out and wrapped around Chu Qingfei's body, pinning him to the ground. Ah! Chu Qingfei let out a blood-curdling scream. He felt as if his internal organs were about to be torn apart by the snake's tail. It was too difficult for him. Master Chu was on the verge of tears. He really didn't expect that such a small mission he had accepted would actually make him face these fiends in front of him so miserably. If he had known that he would encounter Arbor and the others, he would never have accepted this mission. He had already seen how powerful Mo Lien was when he was underground in Greyfield Village. That was a ruthless character who had destroyed his physical body with a single strike, and he had risked his life to escape with his divine soul. The moment he saw Prince Mo, Chu Qingfei had already thought of retreating. When he discovered that the barrel-waisted little woman in front of him was originally Arbor's transformation, the fear in his heart deepened. Afterwards, he simply didn't think of confronting them head-on. His only thought was to escape. Therefore, he fainted and hastily used a transportation talisman matrix to escape. Unfortunately, he failed to teleport twice. Chapter 5054. It was as if the teleportation array had suddenly lost its effect. No matter how he teleported, the light flashed and he returned to his original spot. It was as if there was an invisible rope that hooked him, making it impossible for him to teleport. How would Chu Qingfei know that when Arbor set up the trap array, she had already taken precautions? She used the power of space contained in her body to open the space restriction here. Anyone who entered the range of her trap array would be controlled by the space restriction. If she didn't take you out herself, even if you used the teleportation talisman or the teleportation array, you wouldn't be able to get yourself out of the space restriction here. There was no other reason. There was probably no one in the entire continent who could resist her martial ant's space restriction. She had also studied the space restriction that her master had taught her in her spare time. In just a short period of time, it was almost impossible to study the essence of it. The deeper she studied it, the more she felt that the space restriction was extensive and profound, extremely mysterious. The space restriction that she was using now was still the power that she had absorbed from the small silver ball in the Phoenix Woods. She hadn't used it all before, but now that she had opened the space restriction, she had almost used it up. The remaining power was estimated to be only enough for 5 teleportations. However, the small silver ball that her master had given her contained a vast amount of space restriction. What she had extracted from the Phoenix Woods was only 1/10,000th of it. After using it up, she could still draw more from the small ball, Sir Jojo thought to himself. Chu Qingfei's miserable howl pulled Jojo's thoughts back from the distance. Glancing at him, he snorted and waved his hand to let the snake woman pull Chu Qingfei over. Zualanshan didn't care about a weak human like Chu Qingfei at all. He directly rolled and swung his snake tail, and with a bang, threw Chu Qingfei in front of Arbor as if he was a dead dog. "Don't throw him to death!" Arbor roared. Then she took small steps and hurried over to Chu Qingfei. She took out a pair of white silk gloves from her pocket and put them on. Then she grabbed Chu Qingfei's hair and pulled him in front of her. That rough action didn't look much gentler than the snake woman. Everyone couldn't help but mutter in their hearts. Arbor asked coldly, "Tell me, did Mu Qingya send you here?" It was time to send that damned Mu Qingya on her way. Arbor thought with a cold expression. He raised his hand and took out a communication jade talisman from his inner world. He immediately wrote 2 lines of small words and sent them to Yellow Crane Fairy on the snowy island. "Don't keep Mu Qingya alive, deal with her. She was really fed up with this woman jumping out and biting her every now and then. Although she was only an ordinary person, her methods were unique. Not only could she drive the Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord, Geng Pengcheng, to work for her, but she also had so many followers of the Clear Sky sect who were all extremely fanatical about her. It seemed that Jojo's life would only be peaceful if all these talents were dead. What Arbor didn't know was that he had wronged Mu Qingya this time. At this time, how could Mu Qingya have the ability to strategize to this extent and send Chu Qingfei here to block Arbor? Chu Qingfei himself didn't know that he would meet Arbor in Wangzhuang town on the outskirts of the imperial capital. If he knew that Arbor would come, he would have run away 800 years ago. Previously, he hid outside the talisman array he set up to watch. When he saw Mo Lien from afar, he didn't dare to move. Chapter 50-55. It was only because he saw Arbor and the others leave using the transportation talisman matrix that he dared to sneak over to check on the situation. Who would have thought that Arbor wouldn't play by the rules at all and suddenly turned around to catch him by surprise? Thinking about it, this person must have done this on purpose. In order to lure him, a talisman formation master, out, he deliberately activated the transportation talisman matrix and pretended to teleport away. In reality, they didn't leave at all. When Chu Qingfei thought of this, he wrung his hands even more and inwardly cursed himself for being as stupid as a pig. With several decades of life experience, he actually fell for a youngster's trick and fell into his hands. Arbor took out a normal spirit sword and patted Chu Qingfei's head. Tell me honestly, did Mu Qingya send you to deal with me? If you tell me the truth, I might consider letting you off. Chu Qingfei's lips trembled, and he hastily shook his head. This matter has nothing to do with Hall Master Mu Mu. The little stoic's fist landed on his left eye. Does it have anything to do with it? Yes. It has something to do with it. It was Hall Master Mu who sent me here. Everyone speechlessly twitched their mouths. The little stoic, this was no different from beating someone into confessing. Most importantly, this Master Chu didn't seem to be a particularly unyielding person. After being punched 3 times by the little stoic, he immediately turned on her. Following her temperament, he would say whatever she asked. In reality, there was a high possibility that this matter really had nothing to do with that Hall Master Mu. Poor Mu Qingya. She really was a scapegoat. Arbor's face was gloomy. On his chubby little face, a pair of beady eyes gazed at Master Chu with a cold glint in his eyes. Master Chu couldn't help but shudder again. He kept feeling that if he didn't answer honestly, the sword in this guy's hand would very likely stab into his chest in the next second. I knew it was Mu Qingya who sent someone to do it. She really has a lot of flower escorts. Arbor looked furious and slashed the side of Master Chu's neck with his spirit sword. Besides you, who else is following Mu Qingya? Are the Clear Sky faction's people all dead? How was he supposed to answer this question? Grandmaster Chu looked at Xiqiao with a bitter expression. He wasn't in charge of the Clear Sky sect's affairs. Although he was a member of the Clear Sky sect, he was actually a member of the Hall of Heavenly Fortune Talisman. The reason why he joined Hall Master Mu's Clear Sky faction was entirely because he would help Hall Master Mu out of the temptation of benefits. It wasn't because he was bewitched by beauty like the little stoic said. But now, it seemed that this stoic face didn't want to hear any other explanation at all. She had long determined that everyone around Mu Qingya was under her skirt, including him, Chu Qingfei, who was also Hall Master Mu's beloved follower. If the stoic face wanted to think this way, he really didn't have any other ideas. Clear Sky sect's people, whether they're dead or not, I really don't know. But as far as I know, the vice head of the Clear Sky sect still wants to rescue Hall Master Mumu. The little stoic flew into a rage and slapped Chu Qingfei's shoulder. I just knew that if that woman Mu Qingya didn't die, things definitely wouldn't stop. Then didn't you already order your subordinates to kill Hall Master Mu just now? In reality, Hall Master Mu was truly wronged in today's matter. Chu Qingfei thought speechlessly. Chapter 50-56. Right now, he truly didn't want to say anything more to the little stoic. In any case, no matter what he said, it would be wrong. The little stoic was certain that Mu Qingya was behind this, so what could he freaking do? Speak. I'll speak. I'll tell you everything. Chu Qingfei nearly wanted to cry. Why did he feel that it was so difficult to communicate with this woman in front of him? At this time, Chu Qingfei couldn't resist looking at Mo Lian, who was watching the show from the side. His gaze actually contained a bit of a plea for help. Your Highness, do you still remember this humble one? Mo Lian glanced at him expressionlessly. I don't remember. Everyone, Chu Qingfei said pitifully. I am Grey Ping Village's Earth Spirit Formation. Mo Lian's brows twitched slightly. When this person mentioned Grey Ping Village and the Earth Spirit Formation, Mo Lian's heart couldn't help but jolt. She sized him up and nodded. I remember now. You're a pawn that Tianyun placed in Grey Ping Village to nurture the underground zombies of Grey Ping Village. Back then, you picked up a ready-made formation from a heaven-level talisman master's foundation and used someone else's formation to set up your own Earth Spirit Formation. The outer layer is the Earth Spirit Formation, and the inner layer of defense is the formation set up by that heaven-level talisman master. Arbor's eyes suddenly lit up, and he said, Is it that talisman formation that ancestor Zhaoyang set up? This old man was bragging nonsense. He even said that he set up an 18-layer talisman formation that no one could break open. In the end, Mo Lian saw the existence of a holy meridian underneath. Speaking of this, the little stoic recalled that she should find time to receive the holy meridian that ancestor Zhaoyang left her. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a pity to leave such a fat sheep in a place like Grey Ping Village? You're the person whose physical body I destroyed back then? Mo Lian sized up the old man. Currently, his body was tattered and incomplete. It was unknown where he had taken over this body. Compared to his original body, his appearance was even more unsightly than before. Chu Qingfei's tears really flowed down. He nodded repeatedly and said, Your Highness, it's me. I've already been killed by you once. Can you let me go this time? In your dreams. The little stoic threw at him crisply. Everyone couldn't help but want to laugh as they silently glanced at the child. She glared coldly at Grandmaster Chu and snorted, During the Shuntian Academy tournament, it was you. She poisoned Shagua of the hippopotamus team and stood behind Mu Qingya for a long time. She poisoned me one moment and cast curses on me the next. She contributed to my life. It's you. The little stoic's roar of, It's you, was extremely forceful, just like 3 heavy hammers that pounded on everyone's hearts. Chu Qingfei's eyebrows twitched and he hurriedly shook his head in denial. No, it's not what you think. You're still trying to deceive me. Arbor punched the old man's right eye. The old man hastily cried out miserably, Yes, it's indeed me. During the academy tournament, I poisoned your opponent and also cast a puppet curse. But you broke it very easily. Before the old man could finish speaking, he was slapped silly by the little fellow's slap. From what you're saying, I broke your puppet curse, so that means I shouldn't be angry, right? No. Hua Chu Qingfei's tears streamed down. Chapter 50-57. His face was truly slapped too painfully. No one could compare to this girl's black-hearted. She only slapped your face until your old face is swollen. The little stoic coldly glared at her deformed, chubby little face and said angrily, You still have the face to cry? Indiscriminately, he did so many wrong things as a lackey for someone else, yet he still had the face to cry in front of her. He really was promising. Do you have a disciple? Arbor punched her nose. She specially wore a pair of silk gloves just for when she beat someone up. No. Dirty. Chu Qingfei's tears and snot flowed down as he bawled bitterly, Crown Princess. Don't hit me anymore, Crown Princess. It truly hurt too much. This little Crown Princess only hit his face. By now, the parents of this body's original owner probably wouldn't recognize their son anymore. Speak honestly. Xiao Mu grumpily roared. Don't know where the Crown Princess's words came from. Chu Qingfei was terribly flustered. Lying there, he could hear his heart beating like a drum, as if it was about to jump out of his chest. His left hand, which was hanging by his side, moved slowly and silently. A light purple talisman was pinched in his sweaty palm. This was his last life-saving talisman. If this talisman was also useless against the little stoic, then he would definitely meet his end here today. Don't pretend anymore. Arbor swept him a disdainful glance and sneered, other than that time in the school tournament, you specially poisoned Shagua and the others to deal with me. You even followed me from 1,000 miles away with your disciple to Ani Prefecture and lurked around me for more than 10 days, waiting for an opportunity to make a move. And no such thing out. Chu Qingfei's mouth was smashed by the little stoic's fist. The corner of his mouth broke, his teeth fell out, and his blood mixed with saliva dripped down. Have you thought it through now? Arbor asked coldly. Chu Qingfei hurriedly nodded. The depression in his heart had already reached its peak. He suddenly moved his finger, but at the same time, Mo Lien flashed forward and stepped on his hand. Crack! With a crisp sound, Chu Qingfei's face twisted in pain. His hand, which was holding a talisman, bent unnaturally and fell weakly to the ground. Arbor looked coldly at the purple talisman floating up, but there was no surprise on his face. With a light flick of her hand, she flicked a few times in the air, and the purple talisman that flew in front of her suddenly broke into pieces and exploded. Failing to activate the talisman, Chu Qingfei suffered a powerful backlash. He immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, there wasn't a single piece of unharmed flesh on his body. His miserable appearance was simply unbearable to look at. Arbor continued to stare at him coldly. You dare to do it but don't dare to admit it? At that time, you also received Mu Qingya's order to bring your disciple to chase me to Ani Prefecture, right? You are that great talisman master of heavenly fate who has been hiding behind the scenes all this time? Arbor sized him up before shaking her head and muttering to herself, No, you should only be at the Black Rank realm. That great talisman master of heavenly fate's hidden depths isn't just at this realm. Your disciple is thin and small. When we were in Ani Prefecture, we once had him lead the way to find you. Unfortunately, you were as slippery as a loach from beginning to end. By the time we found your residence, it was already empty and you had already fled. Chu Qingfei's face was already ashen. Chapter 50-58. He stared at Arbor in fright, as if he hadn't heard her words at all. His entire being was immersed in immense fear. You are great curse master. He finally spat out these words. Soon after, he saw a vicious killing intent flash past Arbor's eyes. This young crown prince consort was actually a great talisman practitioner. She had probably kept the vast majority of people in this world in the dark, right? Her identity as a great curse master was, in fact, a great curse master. He was well aware of what that purple talisman of his just now was. It was a life-seizing curse. Right? A curse. And to be able to easily dissolve a profound-level life-seizing talisman, who could she be? She was a curse master, and a great curse master whose rank in the art of curses was a level higher than his. Earth rank? Heaven rank? There was actually such a person in this world who could conceal her identity as a heaven-rank great curse master so well, deceiving everyone. Even he had fallen for her old trick. No wonder Hall Master Mu had wanted the little lady to die all these years, but the little lady couldn't die every time. Ha ha ha. What kind of joke was this, wanting to kill a heaven-rank great curse master? Just by relying on those 2 or 3 people, just by relying on a few mediocre talisman practitioners or curse masters. Could they kill her? It would really be strange if they could. You know too much, Xiaomu said calmly as before. She didn't seem to be the least bit anxious about her identity as a great curse master being exposed. Chu Qingfei's tears streamed down his face. There was no medicine for regret in this world. Even if there was, the little stoic definitely wouldn't be so kind as to let him take it. He was dead for sure today. Just by looking at her calm expression, he knew that he couldn't be any more dead. I can hand over a strand of my soul to follow your excellency forever. Chu Chengfei suppressed the unwillingness in his heart and stammered. Not everyone has the qualifications to become this crown princess subordinate. Arbor said coldly. His cold voice was like a sharp arrow that stabbed into Chu Chengfei's heart. There was no hope left. Kill him. Arbor stood up and said expressionlessly. This person had made a move against her time and time again. He had even chased her for 1,000 li, from Shuntian Prefecture to Ani Prefecture. His evil intentions had yet to die. For such a person, there was no need to continue to make things difficult for him. What's more, his heart was filled with unwillingness, and he might even counterattack from time to time. How could he be allowed to live? Arbor waved his hand and walked away. A short scream came from behind, and then everything returned to normal. GC, Old Zhou, and the other citizens of Sin City all had a serious look in their eyes. Even they didn't dare to casually think about the identity of a grand charm master. They simply didn't dare to make any deep guesses about this mysterious and frightening skill. They didn't have much contact with the little crown princess and only knew that she was a talisman master. Now that they learned that she wasn't just a talisman master but also a grand charm master at the earth rank or above, they couldn't help but respect her a bit more. His Highness the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess weren't ordinary people. Fortunately, they had always been obedient and didn't underestimate this Crown Princess. In order to live more comfortably in the future, they definitely had to be more cautious in their actions in the future. Chapter 50-59. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal walked over with a grin and said, I searched this guy just now. This person is from the Hall of Heavenly Fortune Talismans. The reason he joined the Clear Sky faction is probably because of benefits. Mu Qingya is truly generous to him. Mu Qingya already gave him many benefits for that small matter of poisoning Shuntian Prefecture. According to his memories, there are at least 3 people in the Hall of Heavenly Fortune Talismans whose talisman level is higher than his. One of them is his teacher, Great Master Yi. Jojo should have exchanged blows with him before. The other person is called Luo He. He's the Vice Hall Master of the Hall of Heavenly Fortune Talismans. Arbor nodded. I know him. I don't really remember that Great Master Yi. I met this Luo He not long ago in the Tianji Mystic Realm. Jojo should have also met Great Master Yi before. Yuan Shurchen said with a smile. According to Chu Chengfei's memories, his master, Great Master Yi, has been by young Sir's side for a long time. This young Sir is probably either eldest Qin or Omega Kotoku. Perhaps we've met before, but he shouldn't be conspicuous, so it's normal that Jojo doesn't remember him. Arbor grasped the little fatty's hand with a very solemn expression. Then there's the other person. It's their hall master of the Talisman's Hall. Yuan Shurchen smiled faintly. This person's identity is very mysterious. Even Chu Chengfei, who is Great Master Ye's disciple, has never seen this person before. According to speculation, this person is extremely likely to be a heaven-rank Great Talisman Master. Arbor uttered an "oh" and didn't say anything else. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's lips twitched as he smiled. He walked up to the little stoic and said, Jojo, I've said so much to you, but you're only going to reply with one word? It's already good enough that you have an "oh." Mo Lien rolled his eyes and pulled his rash wife to his side. Jojo usually doesn't bother with people when it comes to topics that don't interest him. Xiao Mu silently glanced at her husband before pulling back her chubby hand. You're spouting nonsense. How could she ignore him? Usually, no matter what others said to her, she would definitely respond. After dealing with Chu Chengfei, Arbor took out the real teleportation array from his sleeve and opened it. Just now, they had all disappeared for a moment because Arbor had activated the invisibility glyph array. At the same time, he had used the power of space in his body to teleport everyone a certain distance away. He had completely fooled Master Chu, causing him to muster up the courage to walk out. As a result, he was caught red-handed by Arbor's men. Jojo wasn't someone who liked to be tricked, but she often tricked others if the little stoic truly wanted to scam someone. Based on her methods and characters since she was a child, she could basically scam someone successfully. The group of people immediately disappeared from Wang Zhuangzhen's trapping array. At the same time, all the residents of Wangzhuang town were taken away. When he appeared again, everyone could not help but let out a long sigh of relief. Thank goodness, they didn't fall into a ditch or crash into a wall this time. They appeared very normally 500 meters away from Dragonflame City's East City Gate. Just from the city gate, everything looked very normal. People shuttled in and out of the city gate normally and lined up in an extremely orderly manner. Arbor and Emolien looked at each other. Should we directly enter the palace? This place looked normal. Could it be that the inner court of the palace was already under someone's control? Chapter 50-60. Emolien was the best at reading little girls' thoughts. Ever since she was young, he could immediately understand the little fellow's small gaze. When he saw her current expression, he couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. Don't underestimate royal father. He wasn't the old great king of the Mo kingdom, so how could his father be so easily controlled? Even if he had already allocated all of the U court guards for him to use, Emolien didn't believe that his old father didn't have anyone he could use by his side. Furthermore, his father's strength wasn't something that his deceitful adoptive father could compare to. Even if the kingdom of Daluo had already secretly snuck into the palace, it was impossible for them to control everyone at the first moment. Don't dream of 1,000 years. We'll enter the city normally and observe the situation from the outside. Emolien curled his lips and couldn't help but sneer. If the city is filled with the kingdom of Daluo's people, then they will naturally find an opportunity to send a message to the palace. If they can't control the palace immediately, then they won't have that opportunity in the future. Most importantly, we have to carefully inspect the city to see if someone has set up a talisman matrix. Arbor quickly nodded when he heard this. Jojo's Lotus was still the most considerate. There were many commoners in the city, so they shouldn't be harmed by the kingdom of Daluo's talisman matrices. Since they planned to enter the city normally, everyone followed the cue. Soon, Arbor noticed that the gazes of the people around them were a bit strange, especially the two women in front of them. They turned their heads several times and continuously sized her and Emolien up. At first, the little stoic didn't understand what was going on, but when she saw those women turn their heads several times to look at them, she suddenly had an epiphany. She lowered her head in a flash of inspiration and saw her husband holding her little chubby hand in a grand manner. The little crown princess expressionlessly pulled her hand away. Her current appearance especially resembled a rich woman who kept a gigolo. She wore a blue satin-lined jacket and a silver hairpin in her hair. But that didn't seem right. In order to match her status as a commoner in Wangzhuang town, she had disguised herself as a commoner when she mixed in with the crowd. Emolien, who was beside her, was dressed in a white robe and looked like an elegant young master. At a glance, one could tell that he was from a noble family. Was she a poor woman keeping a rich man as her mistress? Crush. This image was really enough. Arbor couldn't help but curse in his heart. If he had known that he wouldn't be able to recover, he wouldn't have used the transformation talisman. What are you looking at? Yuan Shurchen snapped at the two women who were staring at them. Were they crazy? Why did they keep turning their heads to look at them instead of queuing properly? The two women muttered a few words and gave Arbor a strange look before turning their heads back. The little stoic was displeased on the inside. She lowered her head to look at her bucket-like waist and her thick and small arms and legs before harumphing indignantly. It's fine, husband likes it, Emolien said with a grin. Who cares what other people think? Let's go our own way. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal rolled his eyes and couldn't help but curse in his heart. I beg you, stop trying to curry favor in front of Jojo all the time. You're simply too shameless. It was especially irritating to see Heaven and Earth grabbing the opportunity to feed other people dog food. The group successfully entered the Eastern City Gate. Less than a second after stepping into Eastern Street, the little stoic's expression couldn't help but change slightly. How is it? Emolien asked softly. There's an unusual smell wafting through the air. Chapter 50-61. Emolien was startled and hurriedly asked, could it be that the people of Daluo have already poisoned the city after they sneaked into the city? It smells like special pollen. Arbor looked up at the gray sky and narrowed his eyes slightly. Mo Lien used a message talisman to summon someone, but after a few seconds, a black-clothed youth appeared in front of them and bowed in a low-key manner. Go and quietly bring the general guarding the East City Gate here. I have something to ask him. Yes. Jojo, there's a small tea house nearby. Let's go up and wait. Everyone quietly went to the tea house. After a while, a personal hidden guard brought a middle-aged general upstairs. The man was sweating profusely and had a nervous expression on his face. When he saw Mo Lien, he hurriedly went up to greet her. In the past 2 days, did you discover anything unusual in the city? The middle-aged general in the East City shook his head, but then he seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly added, Before dawn today, a big black bird appeared in the sky above the city, but it quickly flew away. At that time, we sent a master archer to shoot it from a distance, but unfortunately, the distance was too far and he couldn't hit it. That black bird flew too high, piercing through the clouds. Those who weren't of high cultivation couldn't shoot it at all. That master archer only shot its tail feathers and shot down 2 black feathers. Other than that, there was nothing unusual. Prince Mo and Arbor looked solemnly at each other. It doesn't seem like Tianyun's style, Arbor said with a frown. The previous few times Tianyun attacked, it was always remote villages or places where no one lived at all. His biggest operation was to attack Sangzhou's Yen City. But in the end, it also ended in failure. Arbor continued his analysis. Although their current frequency of action has increased a lot, it's not to the extent of directly attacking Divine Prefecture's imperial capital. Qin Xian and the others aren't that stupid, are they? How could they rashly attack Dragonflame City before they're fully prepared? Mo Lien nodded. I also feel that this is a bit strange. It's very different from Tianyun's usual practice. The reason why Tianyun took down Joe City Fortress before was because that place was originally ungoverned. After that, it's easy to understand why he attacked Wangchuan. The River of Forgetfulness is vast and rich in resources. If we can take over the entire River of Forgetfulness and use it as a base, it will provide them with many convenient resources for their subsequent operations. Arbor and Mo Lien looked at each other again. This matter is not led by the Heavenly Fate Emperor. Tianyun is actually cooperating with a small country like Duoluo? What are they after, unless they can get a lot of benefits from the kingdom of Daluo? What kind of benefits could make Tianyun willing to do this favor and accept such an unreliable task? Your Mo clan has a long-standing grudge with that whatever Duoluo kingdom? Xiaomu asked curiously. Mo Lien shook her head. What grudge could there be? I've never heard of such a small grassland country before. If they hadn't come up with Lily Er's plan and jumped up and down in front of the Crown Prince wouldn't even know what they were. Is that so? Arbor glanced at the Crown Prince in confusion. But I keep feeling that Duoluo seems to be targeting your Mo clan. Although that Lily Er plan is quite annoying to me, it seems that the target of the plan should be you. Chapter 5062. They want to take me away from you and use this to threaten you. They must be plotting something from you. Based on how much Jojo's Lien cared about Jojo, these people must be plotting a gargantuan benefit. When Mo Lien heard the words Lilier's plan, his entire face darkened. They will all die, he said coldly. The people he sent out were already searching everywhere for those Lily heirs. As long as this plan dared to continue, he dared to kill everyone he saw until all these fakes were destroyed. Arbor sighed and said dryly, they are also pitiful women. Jojo. Mo Lien glanced at her with displeasure. Fine. Arbor nodded repeatedly and said, I know that most of them probably brought this upon themselves. I don't pity them. She only felt that it was a pity. Why did they indulge in such wild fantasies and want to become someone else? Wasn't it good to live their own lives? Before the plan was carried out, those Lily heirs already knew what kind of life they were about to face in the future. They willingly became this fake and wanted to replace Arbor. Their thinking was extremely naive and laughable. Furthermore, don't you think it's funny? Who did those Lily heirs meet? Arbor shook her head exasperatedly. They met that bipolar fellow Mingyasi, found Duan Yu, and even met Emo Lien. What kind of freaking excellent luck was this? Jojo. Emo Lien helplessly squeezed his wifey's hand. Let's not stray from the topic. Oh right. Arbor nodded. Since the night cowbird appeared in the eastern district, then the pollen smell I smelled in the city must have been spread by it. Now that we're in such a hurry, I also don't know what the night cowbird spilled this time. Arbor clenched her small fists and lightly slapped the table. How about this? I'll first prescribe a few more types of antidote. Forget it, I'll spray it with all kinds of antidotes first. All right. However, this city still needs to be under martial law for the next few days. Have the people from the patrol camp in the city strengthen their patrols. If they discover a sick person, they must immediately report it. All right. Emo Lien nodded again and turned to look at the middle-aged general who was sweating profusely. That general had already understood the young crown prince consort's intentions. Did the crown prince consort mean that the large black bird that appeared before dawn this morning was sent by the heavenly fate palace to scatter the medicinal powder? Go back. Be more vigilant these few days. 4 hours later, Arbor and Emo Lien used the transmission talisman formation multiple times and wandered around the entire inner city of Dragon Flame City. Fortunately, they were teleported out of the city twice, so they had no choice but to secretly turn back. Fortunately, after going back and forth, Arbor didn't find any traces of the people of Daluo setting up array glyphs. Instead, he studied the original Great City Protection Array of Dragon Flame City from inside out. The original Defender Array of Dragon Flame City was completed hundreds of years ago. Emo Lien said softly, every year, Father would send a special team of talisman masters to carry out talisman power transmission and maintenance. Although it has never been activated, the array glyphs are still intact. At this point, he lowered his head and glanced at his wifey. Jojo, isn't that right? On the way here, Arbor had studied the Defender Array of Dragon Flame City. It was indeed an extremely expensive defensive array from 100 years ago. Chapter 5063. The array disk was set up in the southwest of the palace, and the talisman power inside was also very abundant. The person who set up the array must be a heaven-level talisman master. And there might be more than one person. Dragon Flame City was huge. Without 3 heaven-level talisman masters, it would be impossible to set up such a large array in a month. Very good. Arbor nodded. There was really no need to worry about Dragon Flame City. Once the Defender Array was activated, even if 100,000 soldiers attacked the city from the outside, they would not be able to break it without 3 months. Arbor looked up at her husband. It's a very powerful multi-layer defensive array. There's really no need to worry. Emo Lien grinned and took his wife's hand. Since there's no big problem in the city, let's go back to the palace. The two had just returned to the tea house at the east gate when they saw a horse galloping toward them. At the entrance of the tea house, the person on the horse hurriedly dismounted, rushed forward and bowed. Xiao Chu greets your highness. Emo Lien raised her eyebrows slightly and thought, my old father is really well informed. He got the news so quickly and knew that I was back. Xiao Chu was the chief palace maid by his side. She had been dutiful all these years. Before his mother woke up, she had been in charge of the affairs of the palace. Everyone thought that this chief palace maid would one day turn the tables and be conferred the title of consort by the emperor, but reality proved that she did not. His Majesty saw a golden dragon flying dozens of times above the imperial city and knew that your highness had returned. Your highness must have had a hard time going to the river of forgetfulness. His Majesty said that your highness should quickly enter the palace. Emo Lien knew that after letting Little Seven circle in the air dozens of times and sprinkle a dozen kinds of antidote powder, she knew that her whereabouts could not be hidden from some people's eyes. It seemed that nothing important had happened in the palace, so why did the Grand State Preceptor of Daluo send people to block them at Wangzhuangzhen? Arbor also did not understand and looked at her husband with a puzzled expression. Only now did Xiao Chu see that her crown prince was holding the hand of a small woman with short arms and legs. Whether it was their height, figure, or looks, the two of them were worlds apart. It was too eye-catching. Xiao Chu looked at Arbor with a strange expression, then looked at His Highness the Crown Prince. Before she could speak, Mo Lien calmly put his arm around his wife's waist and whispered, "Jojo, let's go to Imperial Father's place." Arbor was absolutely unwilling to enter the palace at this time. If Mo Lien's father saw his comical appearance, that guy might laugh for a year. No way. Arbor quickly waved his hand. "Since there's nothing else with your father, I'll return to the Eastern Palace first." Mo Lien was secretly amused. Seeing that his wife was adamant about not going with him to see his old father, he could only nod helplessly. "All right then. Jojo, go home first. I'll be back later." The outstanding talent glanced at Xiao Mu again with a strange expression. "Jojo? Wasn't the Crown Princess called Jojo?" She often heard the Crown Prince call her that. But the Crown Princess, she, still not leaving? Mo Lien's indifferent gaze swept over Xiao Chu, causing the latter to quickly look away. Could it be that the Crown Princess went to Wangchuan and was secretly attacked by enemies? Was she framed and her image changed? She had also heard that the two of them seemed to have encountered many things in Wangchuan. A while ago, the emperor had even anxiously sent shadow guards to Wangchuan to find the couple. Chapter 5064. Given His Highness the Crown Prince's love and care for the little Crown Princess, he would not tolerate even a grain of sand in his eyes. He would never allow anyone to disrespect the little Crown Princess in any way, not even a harsh word. Therefore, her impudent and bold gaze must have angered His Highness the Crown Prince. Thinking of this, Xiao Chu couldn't help but feel a little shocked. She hurriedly restrained her expression and bowed respectfully to Arbor. Xiao Chu's eyes were poor. "I didn't know that the Crown Princess was here." She quickly swept a glance at Arbor and hurriedly lowered her head. Arbor was very sharp and immediately caught the hint of surprise in this head palace maid's eyes. Yes, her current image was very bad, so it was natural for her to be surprised. However, Xiao Chu's surprise felt very strange. It seemed that her surprised gaze also contained some sympathy and pity. What the hell? Did she think that Sir Jojo's current image was permanent? "I'll be able to recover in 4 hours, alright." Sir Jojo, who had been pitted for no reason, was not in a good mood. "Jojo." Mo Lien smiled and patted her head. "Your husband will be back in 2 hours. Let's have dinner together." Arbor nodded and looked at his back as he rode away. Her brows furrowed slightly. Xiao Mu felt a bit strange, and her heart was a bit unsettled. Hence, she attributed this strange feeling to an omen. Her experience growing up told her that her intuition was very sharp. "Little butterflies, follow His Highness into the palace to take a look." Arbor flicked her fingers. 2 black poison-tailed butterflies flapped their wings and quickly chased after Mo Lien. "Is there something wrong with that woman?" The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal walked to Arbor's side and asked in a low voice. Her eyes are clear and her complexion normal. She wasn't drugged or controlled. She wasn't under any puppet spell. Arbor shook her head. However, her intuition had always been accurate. She had a feeling that a storm was coming, as if something was about to happen. Arbor returned to the Eastern Palace. He first returned to the Star Domain to wash up and wash off the dust on his body. When he came out, he had just sat down at the table and asked Kai Xiu to bring him a cup of tea when he received an urgent message from Mo Lien. "Jojo, quickly come to Imperial Mother's Morning Sunlight Palace." Xiao Mu abruptly jumped up from her stool and knocked over the tea beside her. There was an inexplicable sense of panic in her heart that she could not suppress. He hurriedly took a robe, put it on, and ran out of the room. Then, he saw a black shadow suddenly appear beside him and hurriedly cupped his fists. "Crown Princess, His Highness has ordered this subordinate to bring the Crown Princess to Morning Sunlight Palace." "What happened?" Arbor pursed his lips and asked sternly. His Highness the Crown Prince finished talking with His Majesty and went to the Empress. The Empress said that she had invited your mother, the Crown Princess, to the palace for tonight's banquet and asked His Highness to stay for dinner. Who knows, when your mother entered the palace, she brought you along to pay respects to the Empress. "What do you mean?" Sir Jojo's heart could not help but fiercely shrink. The secret guard hurriedly said, It's what you think, Crown Princess. Your mother brought a fake into the palace. Xiao Mu only felt like the world was spinning. No wonder she felt that something was off everywhere. With the country of Daluo's weak power, it was impossible for them to make a move against the imperial palace. They found her mother. Chapter 5065. No wonder her heart was palpitating earlier, feeling that something was about to happen. So it was because the people of the country of Daluo had reached into her home first? Although the Qiao estate didn't have any guards on the surface, there were hidden guards in the dark, so this point was quite strange. How did that fake enter the door without alerting the hidden guards and deceive her mother? Although her mother's cultivation wasn't high, her daughter's personality had long been imprinted in her bones and blood after interacting with her for so many years. Arbor believed that her mother definitely wouldn't mistake her for someone else. Therefore, there was a high chance that this matter was even the hidden guards of the Qiao estate had probably fallen into some kind of trap. The hidden guards saw an extremely bloodthirsty and sinister smile on the little crown princess's face. Like a devil returning from hell, that pair of deformed little eyes emitted a sinister light and emitted endless ghost energy. He immediately shuddered and didn't dare to say anything more. He turned around and led the way, rapidly leading the crown princess to the Empress' central palace hall. The people of the country of Daluo had courted disaster this time by messing with the crown princess. There was no doubt that they would be in for a lot of bad luck in the future. The two figures were as fast as lightning, quickly disappearing into the dark night. On the other side of the room, Bai Wuxiao discovered that her son's complexion was very bad. His pair of cold phoenix eyes occasionally swept across the crowd, revealing an extremely chilly and austere intent. Ever since Madame Wei Shi brought her daughter into the palace to meet the Empress, the crown prince's complexion immediately changed. Bai Wuxiao felt that things were developing in a strange direction. The news of the crown prince's return to the capital was first informed by His Majesty. At that time, she received news that the crown prince and his entourage had already returned to the capital, but she didn't see the crown princess accompanying them. Now, the crown princess had only returned to her maternal home and entered the palace with her mother. Why did her son's complexion become so strange? Queen Bai secretly glared at her son, then smiled at Wei Ziqin and said, "Madam Wei." Prince Mo suddenly stood up and bowed to his mother. "Mother, your son will go pick up his wife." Queen Bai looked confused. She looked back at Wei Ziqin, who was smiling. She looked at the little girl next to her. What kind of person was the Empress? If she still couldn't sense that something was amiss, then she would be a real fool. She looked suspiciously at Madame Wei and her daughter before her gaze fell on Wei Ziqin. Their son spoke bluntly to the two people in front of him and even said that he was going out to pick up his wife? What did he mean by picking up his wife? Did that mean that the little girl who looked like Jojo wasn't his wife? Could it be a fake? The more Bai Wuxiao looked at Madame Wei and her daughter, the more uncomfortable he felt. She was now a little confused and kept looking at the door, waiting for her son to come in and explain to her. At first glance, he felt that there was nothing wrong with this facial paralysis in front of him. But for some reason, the more he looked, the more uncomfortable he felt. The eyebrows were very similar, but sitting there, the aura was completely different. "Your Majesty, what's wrong?" Wei Ziqin looked at her in confusion and asked, "Why did His Highness the Crown Prince suddenly get angry?" Today, the Empress had summoned many women. At this moment, everyone looked curiously at Wei Ziqin and her daughter. They were more or less curious. Everyone present more or less knew that the Crown Princess was a troublemaker. Chapter 5066. After experiencing several palace banquets, most of them were very well behaved now. They didn't dare to treat the little Crown Princess as an ordinary person. Think about it. When did something good happen when the little Crown Princess was invited to a banquet? Everyone who dared to provoke the Crown Princess at a palace banquet definitely didn't have a good ending. From a small matter like Madame Gua to a big matter like the City of Shadows at the most recent palace banquet, the little Crown Princess slapped the face of a single alchemist. She drew a sage-grade golden talisman and even summoned a frightening ferocious beast. At that time, Everyone present was dumbfounded. They couldn't think about it. If they thought too much about it, it would only make them cry. So today, when this group of noble ladies and madams saw Wei Ziqin and her daughter arrive, they all went up to greet them in a very friendly manner. All of them revealed quail-like smiles. If they couldn't defend them, then they should hide and go along with them. But they felt that things were developing in a strange direction again. His Highness the Crown Prince, who had always doted on the Crown Princess endlessly, actually gave the Crown Princess and her mother, Madame Wei, a cold shoulder in front of everyone today? Was the wind going to change direction again? It was said that His Highness the Crown Prince encountered a great danger during his trip to the River of Forgetfulness. When he entered the city this time, the Crown Princess wasn't by his side at all. Could it be that His Highness the Crown Prince finally couldn't stand that fierce girl and completely fell out with the Crown Princess? Prince Mo quickly walked out of the palace hall and coincidentally bumped into the outstanding talent leading a group of people in his direction. The outstanding talent hurriedly led the group of palace maids to greet him as soon as they met. "Greetings, Your Highness the Crown Prince." The outstanding talent said respectfully, "This servant is under His Majesty's orders to bring some special tribute fruits to Your Highness and the madams." The Crown Prince swept a glance and saw many fist-sized, translucent, and pink fruits on the fruit platter. He didn't pay much attention to it and only nodded slightly before walking over. Just as he reached the long steps in front of the palace hall, he saw a round little figure flying over as fast as lightning. He jumped in front of him in an instant. Mo Lien hurriedly reached out to hug her and lifted her sleeve to wipe the sweat off her forehead. "Why did you run so fast?" "Don't worry, those two people won't be able to escape." "Where are they?" Mr. Jojo roared angrily. Mo Lien hugged her and swayed, crying out pitifully, "Jojo, your husband was molested." Pooh. Arber's eyes flashed with killing intent. "It's that fake." She kept throwing flirtatious glances at me as soon as she arrived. At first, I thought her eyes were cramping. Arber moved his limbs and shouted, "I'm going to kill her." "Let's ask him first." Mo Lien hurriedly pressed down on his wife's body and smiled. "Let's get to the bottom of this first. I've already sent someone to the Qiao residence to check on the situation. We'll receive a reply soon." The outstanding talent walked a few steps and turned back to glare at a palace maid who had stopped in her tracks. "Don't look around. Don't you know the rules?" That palace maid hurriedly retracted her gaze and asked the outstanding talent with a strange expression, "Aunt, who is that plump woman? How could she be so intimate with the Crown Prince?" It was simply inconceivable. The outstanding talent coldly swept her a glance. "Do your own thing. Don't ask about things that you shouldn't meddle in." That palace maid followed behind the group and couldn't help but twitch her mouth. Unwilling to give up, she turned back to look at the plump woman with a bucket-like waist. It seemed that His Highness the Crown Prince's judgment of people wasn't very good. He previously doted on that extremely bad-tempered Crown Princess so much. Chapter 5067. But no matter what, even though the Crown Princess had a bad temper, she was still good-looking. But this plump woman with a bucket-like waist, no matter how one looked at her, she looked disgusting, right? Why was His Highness's eyesight getting worse and worse? The little royal maid stumbled slightly and hurriedly lowered her head to look at the road, quickly catching up with the group of outstanding talents in front of her. "Jojo, don't get angry first. Let's understand the situation first." After all, they had been away from Forget River for so long, so they really didn't know what had happened at home. If by any chance Qiao Zhongbang, Wei Ziqin, and second uncle's family had all fallen into someone else's hands now, then when they did things, they would definitely be restrained and restrained. "That mother of yours is also a fake." Mo Lien lowered her head and whispered in Arber's ear. When they met just now, the fake Wei Ziqin gave him a very fake smile and even called him, "Your Highness the Crown Prince," with some respect in her expression. How could this be Jojo's mother herself? Jojo's parents and second uncle's family all called him Little Mo when they saw him. How could they call him, "Your Highness the Crown Prince"? "Your Highness the Crown Prince" was what outsiders called him. How could his own people call him that? "I'm worried about them. Arbor's expression was very ugly, especially since Xiao Yao should be about to give birth soon. She didn't know how her family was doing now. Mo Lien gripped his wife's small hand tightly and deliberately said in a relaxed tone, "When we were on Sikong planet, we had seen all kinds of storms. We could even resist the siege of the Shi family of China. I believe that our family will definitely be fine." Arbor nodded and quickened her pace, walking hand in hand with Mo Lien into the main hall. Along the way, Arbor was already used to those strange gazes. It was similar to how those aunties and big sisters at the city gate looked at her. It was just that the madams and misses present here had much more noble statuses. Arbor was already very calm. In any case, her husband didn't mind, so why should she care about the gazes of others? Even if she was 70 or 80 years old and hunched over, Jojo's lotus was still Jojo's. Bai Wuxia looked up and saw the couple holding hands. He quickly stood up and asked, "Tang Yuan's wife, what's wrong? How could it be did he take some medicine that he shouldn't have? He was still poisoned. What's going on? You're even shorter than the last time I saw you." Arbor looked at Queen Bai, speechless. Mo Lien couldn't help but twitch her lips. "Mother, can you not mention the word, short?" The Empress's reaction could be said to be extremely fast. A strong desire to survive arose spontaneously. No matter what had happened before, she still couldn't figure it out. At this moment, whenever they saw their son holding the hand of a lady or woman, they would recognize her as Tang Yuan's wife. Even if their daughter-in-law's appearance had changed drastically, their son would not mistake her for his wife. As a mother, how could she not know that her son's taste was unique? Wei Ziqin stood up with a slightly unpleasant expression. She coldly glanced at Arbor, who was next to the crown prince. "What is the meaning of this, Your Highness?" The women in the hall were a little confused. Their gazes all fell on Arbor's face. They couldn't help but think to themselves, "I can't bear to see this. The crown prince is as handsome as a god, but now he's holding the hand of a short woman. The funniest one is the Empress." Chapter 5068. The little stoic crown princess was clearly sitting next to Madame Nei Wei, but Her Majesty the Empress actually called that woman with a bucket-like waist her daughter-in-law. What kind of stupid thing was this? The noble ladies and madams in the hall coughed lightly and looked over in confusion. At this moment, Arbor and Mo Lien strode into the main hall at the same time, and their gazes immediately locked onto the mother and daughter pair. They had Wei Ziqin's face and figure, but Arbor didn't need to look to immediately sense that this woman impersonating Wei Ziqin didn't resemble her mother in any way. In Mo Lien's eyes, the stoic-faced young lady sitting next to Madame Nei Wei was simply trying to draw a tiger but ended up looking like a dog instead. It was simply too laughable. Jojo's adorably stoic face had been carved into the depths of his blood and bones since he was young, leaving an incomparably deep impression. Just based on this woman in front of him, she could pretend to be stoic just by putting on a stoic face? She was more like an idiot. She looked like an idiot and didn't seem to be quick-witted at all. His emotions were ignited at the slightest spark, and he was on the verge of exploding. Arbor suddenly felt Mo Lien's finger pressing down lightly on his palm. She forcibly suppressed the fury that was about to erupt and slowly suppressed it. Since this mother and daughter pair dared to enter the palace so openly, they must have something to rely on. Otherwise, why would they dare to step into the palace's inner court and walk right into a trap? Therefore, Mother and them Arbor's heart tightened slightly. "You're the perfect creation, Lily, or number 0, right?" This was Arbor's first time seeing someone who looked infinitely similar to her up close. If one only looked at their appearances, they really were very similar. Their appearances were almost 70% similar, and absolutely no one would be able to distinguish the two from more than 10 meters away. If this impersonator was placed together with the original little crown princess, they were completely like a pair of twin sisters. This was the real mature creation of the state preceptor. The ones he had encountered before were probably just immature imitations. Arbor's gaze fell on the woman's face. It was hard to imagine that there would actually be such a group of people in this world. They were unwilling to face their own lives and racked their brains just to imitate others. What was the meaning of a life that was replicated like this? The stoic-faced young lady beside Madame Wei hastily stood up uneasily and looked at Arbor in confusion. "Who are you?" "Everyone knows that the Crown Princess is a great talisman master. She is best at drawing talismans in the air. Give me one." Arbor looked at her indifferently and got straight to the point. Everyone had a baffled look on their faces. There were even a few nervous women who hurriedly got up and quickly called the servant girls and manservants beside them to move their tables and chairs to the back. What kind of joke was this? The Crown Princess was about to draw talismans in the air and summon that ferocious beast whose face couldn't be seen clearly. According to their past experience, this person who dared to provoke the Crown Princess must be tired of living. For safety's sake, the madams decided that it was better to stay away from this little Crown Princess who could explode at any time. This impersonator actually didn't panic and stood up naturally and gracefully. She bowed at Empress Bai before turning to Arbor with cupped fists and a smile. Only then did she say gently, "What's so difficult about drawing talismans in the air?" "It's just that, Madam, in what capacity are you asking me to draw talismans in the air?" Chapter 5069. As soon as the fake finished speaking, Arbor didn't say anything else. He raised his hand and swiped at the air in front of him, creating ripples. He drew and revealed talisman in a few minutes and quickly threw it over. What was strange was that just as Arbor made this move, the fake opposite him also moved her hand very quickly. She copied him and drew a few lines in the air, as if she had learned it on the spot. Her movements were actually quite accurate. The fake also moved her finger and quickly drew a talisman in the air, which collided head-on with the reveal talisman that Arbor had flown over. Everyone saw the two void talismans collide in the air, creating a beautiful stream of light. The power of the talisman splashed everywhere and dissipated with a few whooshing sounds. The group of officials, madams, noble ladies, and laymen could only watch the commotion. They only saw the brilliant light in front of them and really couldn't see what was going on. However, they could clearly see that the little woman with a water bucket waist standing next to the Crown Prince didn't have any change in expression when she shot out a void talisman. However, the Crown Princess on the other side swayed a few times. It can't be who would believe that such a fierce person like the Crown Princess would actually be defeated in one move? Everyone glanced at the little pudgy Xiao Mu in bewilderment before looking at the slightly pale fake. They heard the slightly older madam of Censor Jiang murmur in a low voice, "What we see may not be real. Could it be that the Crown Princess we see is actually an imposter? And the one that His Highness the Crown Prince led through the door is actually the real Crown Princess?" As soon as she said this, everyone seemed to have been enlightened and instantly sobered up a bit. A madam on the side quickly nodded and said, "No wonder that water bucket, cough, young madam." When she said this, she couldn't help but feel awkward. How should she address the woman with a water bucket waist at the door? She definitely didn't look young. Calling her young madam didn't seem appropriate. Calling her the Crown Princess looking at that pair of mung bean eyes and that ordinary ugly face, she really couldn't bring herself to call her that. What kind of strange trick was this little Crown Princess up to? Why did she suddenly change her face and have to torment herself to look like a middle-aged woman? From the looks of it, His Highness the Crown Prince truly loved his wife. This little Crown Princess had already tormented herself into such an ugly state, but His Highness was still able to turn a blind eye to it. How great must he be to be able to do this? On Arbor's side, his eyes were slightly bright as he stared at the fake in front of him. There was a completely incomprehensible luster in his eyes. "Your imitation is not bad." Arbor took 2 steps forward and suddenly became interested. "Let me see the effect of your imitation talisman." As soon as she finished speaking, she moved like a bolt of lightning. Her fingers formed seals as she ceaselessly stirred the air in front of her, and she ceaselessly changed various hand signs and movements. Everyone only felt their vision blur as they saw the air fluctuate. Talismans glowing with purple light were drawn by the young woman with a water bucket waist in the air. Row after row, the list went on so quickly that it made everyone's breathing stop. The head of the fake opposite him was dripping with sweat. At first, he could keep up with the speed of Arbor's talismans, But after a few minutes, even a layman could see that something was wrong. Something was too wrong. That fake crown princess's hand signs were the same as the other person's, except for the first time when a talisman flew out and knocked away the water bucket waste woman's void talisman attack. Chapter 50-70. After that, there were no more flashes of talisman light. On the other hand, the barrel-waisted woman was like a demon. Talisman after talisman appeared in the air. She continuously drew 99 void talismans. 3 in a row, 33 in a row. From top to bottom, it formed a purple talisman wall in front of everyone. Who could keep up with this speed of talisman drawing? Even if they used imitation talismans, they could not keep up with Arbor's movements and speed. Even though everyone had seen many talisman masters before, this was the first time they had seen such a scene. They were so shocked that their jaws dropped. At this moment, everyone saw the barrel-waisted woman facing the fake crown princess and coldly curl her lips. After this action, her chubby face began to change little by little. Her facial features were rapidly recovering, slowly recovering to their original appearance. This scene was indeed magical enough. The transformation talisman's effect disappeared at this moment, and the young crown prince consort regained her original appearance. The illusory excess fat on her stomach also disappeared. What replaced it was the thin figure of the crown princess under a wide satin jacket. Her eyes were cold. It was the same rustic jacket and the same simple silver hairpin. However, at this moment, the little crown princess was shockingly beautiful in everyone's eyes. Other people's beauty faded with the passage of time. The little crown princess seemed to be different. The little crown princess became more beautiful with the passage of time. Seeing her today, they felt that compared to the past, she seemed to have a faint charm. There was an indescribable feeling between her eyebrows. Queen Bee slapped her thigh and happily stood up. "Sweetheart, you've finally changed back. Quick, quick, come to mother. Let mother take a good look at you. Daughter-in-law, I haven't seen you for a long time. Why do I feel that you've gained weight?" The crown prince could not help but roll his eyes. What was wrong with his mother? She said that his wife was short and fat. If you don't know how to speak, then don't say it. The little crown princess subconsciously touched her lower abdomen and nodded as she admitted, "I am a little plump." It was time for her to gain some weight. She should take care of her small body and let baby Mo grow up well. As an experienced person, Empress Bai's eyes immediately lit up when she saw her daughter-in-law's little action. At this moment, she couldn't care less about being an empress. She walked over to the two of them and asked, "Little glutinous dumpling, is your wife, mother?" Prince Mo rolled his eyes at her in dissatisfaction. Is this the time to talk about these things? How could it not be the right time? His daughter-in-law was pregnant, which was a big deal. It was much more important than those messy things. All right. Mother will let you settle the matter first. The White Queen curled her lips and stopped. She looked at the 33 rows of talisman walls in front of her daughter-in-law, and her eyes lit up. Tang Yuan's wife, what talisman formation is this? 9-9-1 attack talisman formation, Arbor said expressionlessly. I created it myself. The White Queen immediately revealed her true thoughts and nodded with praise. As expected of my daughter-in-law. You have no problem creating your own talisman formation. Quick, let mother open her eyes and see how effective this attack talisman formation is. Mother. Mo Lien secretly gave her a look. The White Queen immediately understood. She raised her hand and opened it slightly. A transparent and flawless defensive wall immediately appeared between her hands. Chapter 50-71. The barrier abruptly landed beside the young crown prince consort and the fake. At the same time, the crown prince waved his hand to form 2 defensive walls around them. Following which, the 99 talismans that were drawn in the void started to spin like butterflies. The talismans spun, leaving afterimages in front of everyone. In the blink of an eye, they had surrounded the screaming fake crown princess. The hearts of the many noble ladies and madams of the officials all skipped a beat. They hurriedly stepped back, hoping to get as far away as possible. Fortunately, All the commotion happened within the defensive barrier that the White Queen and Prince Mo had set up together. It did not affect other places. The 99 offensive talismans spun into a cocoon shape, wrapping around the fake crown princess. Suddenly, in a strange way, the 99 talismans combined into a huge talisman that was more than 20 times larger than a normal talisman. It emitted a holy golden light. While everyone was gaping in shock, it charged toward the fake crown princess with the force of a thunderbolt. That unlucky fake was instantly bound by the golden light and pressed to the ground by that super large talisman. Instantly, he spat out a mouthful of blood. What's the use of an imitation talisman? It's similar in appearance but not in spirit. Arbor shook his head helplessly. He waved his hand and said, "Explode." The huge golden talisman wrapped tightly around the fake. At this moment, a strange light burst out. All the offensive talisman power turned into thousands of streams of light, piercing through the fake crown princess body without any hindrance. Everyone stared blankly at him. They felt that in an instant, the unlucky one had been turned into a sieve by the thousands of streams of light. Small holes appeared all over her body from top to bottom. They were all holes caused by the thousands of streams of light. They were densely arranged on her body, arms, face, and neck. After she stood up with difficulty, she raised her head. She looked very strange. It was as if she was a fountain that had been poked with thousands of needles and was leaking from head to toe. There wasn't a single spot on his body that wasn't bleeding. Bright red beads of blood were constantly pouring out from the tiny holes on his body. The unlucky fake could only watch as his blood flowed out of his body. His entire face was no longer calm and expressionless. It was completely twisted beyond recognition. He could feel his life force slipping away, and his life was about to come to an end. "You tried to paint a tiger but ended up looking like a dog," Mo Lien angrily rebuked. She raised her sleeve and slapped the fake heavily across the air. Scram! Just looking at it was disgusting. She actually dared to impersonate his Charles and openly enter the palace to annoy him. She was simply courting death. Boom! The fake crown prince consort fell straight to the ground, sprawled out on all fours as her limbs drooped down weakly. Bai Wuxia called out helplessly, "Quick, someone come and carry her out. Don't dirty this consort's newly laid carpet." So hateful. The empress walked over to her son and daughter-in-law and said with a smile, "Quick, come and tell mother about the important matters." Tang Yuan's wife, "Are you, report?" At this moment, a secret guard from the palace rushed over. He knelt on one knee and said, "Reporting to the empress, Grand Concubine Feng's carriage has been surrounded by a large group of strange-faced harpies at the east gate." The empress' eyes narrowed dangerously. The Grand Concubine had indeed gone to Longting Temple to burn incense today. It was about time for her to return to the palace. She finally couldn't hold back anymore. Chapter 5072. 50824 Addendum. So that's what it was all about. Realization dawned on Queen Bai's face. She glanced at the impostor on the ground, and understanding flitted through her eyes. "Your Majesty, Madame Wei is missing," a female official beside the Empress reminded her in a small voice. Queen Bai glanced and saw that Madame Wei was nowhere to be seen. She quickly looked at her son and daughter-in-law and grumbled, "Madame Wei escaped. She got off too easy." Earlier, everyone's eyes were focused on the 99 void purple talismans that flew out of Arbor. They were so shocked that they couldn't recover their wits for a while. Thus, Madame Wei took advantage of this gap and quietly slipped out of the door. No one saw her. Arbor snorted disapprovingly. "She can't escape." When Queen Bai heard this, she knew there was hope. She looked at Arbor with a curious expression. "Daughter-in-law, what brilliant plan do you have? Quickly tell mother." Looking at her daughter-in-law's calm and stoic face, the Empress was dying of curiosity. "I placed a tracking talisman on her. As long as she doesn't leave Dragonflame City's range, I can receive feedback on her location at any time," the little stoic whispered to the Empress. "Other than that, I also sent out tracking poison-tailed butterflies to follow her. She hasn't gone far. She's circling around the chrysanthemum garden outside your hall." "Is that so?" Then let's hurry over and catch her, Queen Bai said in a low voice. We can't let her escape like this. Since she dares to enter the palace so openly, she must have a plan and must have something to rely on. We can't lower our guard. There's no rush. Arbor tugged on the Empress' sleeve. I placed a talisman array there. She won't be able to leave anytime soon. Queen Bai quickly asked, Daughter-in-law, when did you place a talisman array in the chrysanthemum garden? When I came, I placed a talisman array everywhere I passed. As long as I use my divine consciousness, the talisman array will activate. Queen Bai looked astonished. She glanced at her daughter-in-law and murmured, Can mother ask how many talisman arrays you placed? Arbor blinked and tilted his head. I didn't count, but there are more than 20 rune arrays. White Queen was speechless. They're all trapping arrays? All of them. Trapping array, bewildering array, killing array, gravity array. White Queen was speechless. She suddenly didn't feel like talking to her daughter-in-law. The Empress, who originally thought that her talent was not bad, felt that life was really there was no harm if there was no comparison. Once there was a comparison, she immediately felt tens of thousands of points of damage. It was simply too speechless. This little guy was actually able to set up dozens of talisman arrays that were not the same as he was on his way here? This was too inconceivable. Prince Mo, who had been pushed aside by his mother, looked speechlessly at the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law who had been whispering to each other for a long time. He quickly stepped forward and said, Mother, what are you and Jojo talking about? After he finished speaking, he hurriedly left. He had been dominating his son and daughter-in-law for so long. He was simply disrespectful. Son, your wife is really extraordinary. She's far from ordinary. Empress Bai clicked her tongue and said, You've really picked up a treasure. Of course. When Prince Mo heard his mother praise his daughter-in-law, his previous anger was immediately swept away. He put on a smiling face and nodded. Mother, Jojo's talent in drawing talismans is really you don't know if you haven't seen it. It's definitely. If Jojo says he's second, no one in this world would dare to say they're first. Chapter 5073. Yes. The White Queen nodded in agreement and thought to herself, I must go with my son and daughter-in-law later and see the dozen or so different talisman arrays set up by my daughter-in-law to broaden my horizons. The mother and son gathered together to flatter Arbor, but the person in question glanced at them helplessly. Seeing the two talking enthusiastically, Arbor could only speechlessly pull the crown prince's sleeve and point at the fake crown princess who was paralyzed on the ground. Mo Lien glanced over from the corner of his eyes, only to see the fake lying on the ground suddenly move his limbs. Her hands were twisted in a very twisted posture and turned slightly behind her back. Arbor's eyes flickered. He looked carefully and found that the fake's hands and feet were connected to a transparent thread. When the thread moved, the fake immediately got up and crawled a few steps forward in a stiff posture. Two beams of cold light appeared in her eyes as she stared faintly at Arbor in front of her. Arbor was not afraid of her even when she was alive, let alone the puppet in front of him who was controlled by someone else. He glanced at her contemptuously and drew 3 offensive purple talismans in the air with his fingers. Swish, swish, swish. They rushed toward the puppet's head. The fierce attacks landed on the fake's head 3 times in a row. The latter let out an unpleasant roar and crawled on the ground with her sharp nails. Filth dripped from her mouth. Why are you hiding? Since you've come, then quickly show yourself. The White Queen could not help but laugh. She raised her hands and 2 flying fireballs crashed toward the eaves. Along with a crisp bang sound, fine powder fell from the palace beam. A black figure suddenly landed on the ground. The newcomer bent over and made a defensive posture. Under the mask, a pair of small black eyes flashed with a cunning light. Your talisman skills are not bad. Arbor did not say anything and gave him 9 offensive talismans. The latter's expression immediately changed. He dodged left and right, trying to avoid her attack. However, his body moved and crashed into a defensive wall behind him. Only then did he realize that there were 4 defensive walls around him. No, The moment he appeared, he was trapped in the defensive array glyphs of the little crown princess. This abominable girl's methods were truly impressive. The Grand State Preceptor knew that it would be extremely difficult to impersonate the little crown princess. Therefore, they decided to be prepared and cast a mimic talisman on Lily or Zero. If they met the real crown princess, they could use the mimic talisman to fool others. Moreover, the Grand State Master had clearly told them from the start that they could enter the palace as they wished. The crown princess had already sent people to delay them. But now it was obvious that the plan could not keep up with the changes. Everything had failed because of the little crown princess's return to the palace. Damn it! How did things suddenly develop to this point? The people sent by the state preceptor to stall the crown prince and the crown princess were all useless. So many people couldn't even hold back two young people. The puppeteer dodged several attack talismans from Arbor, but when he turned around he accidentally hit his head on the defensive wall. At that time he was drunk. He only felt a sizzling electric current on the defensive wall that slid through his body and electrocuted him, throwing him to the ground heavily. The puppeteer cursed in his heart. His eyes were so frightened that they were distorted. He quickly turned to look in the direction of Arbor. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.